Ladies and gentlemen, it's another opportunity, fireside chat. We're talking to retired Colonel Bill Ostlund. He was this distinguished leader with a career that exemplifies dedication and resilience. And we just want to give you some kind of background so you understand why we brought on Bill today to have a conversation with this very powerful leader. He enlisted back in the Army way before most of us was born. I was born in 81, so he beat me by 2 days in 1983. He enlisted with the elite 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, distinguishing himself, was a Jumpmaster as a specialist. 87, moved back to Nebraska to join the Nebraska National Guard, got his bachelor's degree, then commissioned as an officer and spent a 36-year career. Colonel Ostlund had a pivotal leadership role in various units, the 101st, the 75th Ranger Regiment, and one of my old alma maters, the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, notably his 15-month deployment as the Combat Command Task Force ROC, leading his battalion through intense combat operations, which led to over 400 individuals receiving individual valor awards, a presidential citation, and 3 Medal of Honors. Colonel Ostlund contributed significantly to his military education, serving as the director of military instruction at West Point, where he got to meet one of our members, Gavin Berkeley, which is awesome, which allowed us to meet Bill. And in 2019, he seamlessly transitioned into the private sector, bringing his extensive experience to a corporate security role at Google and YouTube. His journey from the front lines to corporate world offers invaluable insights into leadership, adaptability, and application of military and principles in a diverse environment. Today, we are privileged to have Colonel Ostlund share his wealth of experience, shedding light on the essence of leadership, the power of resilience, and a critical role of discipline in achieving success. For a deeper insight into Colonel Ostlund's experience and perspective, you might find this interview discussing his military career and transition to corporate security is very valuable. So we really want you to tune in. Before we pass over to Colonel Ostlund, we'd like Gavin to really give his background, how he met Colonel Ostlund.
Thanks, Mac. Even though you got my last name wrong there, it's okay. Still love you, brother. But, this is a huge honor for me. Colonel retired Ostlund. During my time at West Point, he served as the head of the Department of Military Instruction. So got to hear him speak a lot, and a lot of things he said really stuck with me and a lot of my classmates. I know he mentored a lot of my classmates as well, and then some of my teammates on the wrestling team during my time there. And seeing him throughout summer training, kind of always leading from the front. You'd see him out there with his camouflage on, 2 standard, which a lot of us weren't, but he was out there leading from the front. And just having this conversation, I was afforded the opportunity during my time at school. I got to go do kind of an internship with Naval Special Warfare Group 2 and talk to a Captain retired Pete Van Hooser, and he told me something that stuck with me. And he said that I'm always humbled in the presence of warriors. And that's exactly how I feel right now, being able to sit down and talk and hear from Bill, which sounds it's kind of weird for me to say Bill because I'm not calling him sir, but immense respect for him and very honored to have him. And I'll turn it over to Mac and let us get started with some awesome questions we have here for Bill.
All right, Bill, before I throw a ton of questions at you, just really give us a background of who you are.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Mac and Gavin, and I'm humbled and appreciative of being asked to be on the Beyond the Trek podcast, and we've talked before, and I just really respect the intent and output of your podcast and everything you both of you have done and continue to do for others. And you mentioned Pete Van Hooser, who absolute phenomenal warrior, and purposefully brought back into the task force to address some issues because of his extreme competence and reputation, and he did really great things for a really great organization, and I was honored and privileged to work with Pete for a little bit, and I got utmost respect for him. So, and as we go through, I never want to convey or portray that I've got like the answer to the test, but I love having these discussions, and I learn as much from hosts in events like this or teammates, regardless of age, experience, where they're working today, working yesterday. It's like, how do we take the best out of everybody's experience, right? To, kind of polish ourselves and make us better. And, just having conversations with you two previously just absolutely convinced me that we would get there. So a little bit about myself is, everybody's got a story. I mean, every Ranger I know was going to be a Marine at some point in time, right? So was I. And I love the Marines, and I love saying that. But early on in my life, I was born and raised in northern Minnesota. Mom was divorced early in my life. Met the best man on the planet who became my dad at a young age, and was a young man, super honorable family, blue collar, worked his ass off, and really laid the first layer of a phenomenal foundation for me. He and my grandfather, both grandfathers. Moved from Minnesota to Nebraska to Omaha, so from the hinterland of Minnesota to the suburbs of Omaha, right before my freshman year. And in that time, didn't really know anybody, so was reading a lot. And it was 1979, a few years out of Vietnam, so I was just reading all these books, just like we have now from the global war. Great people writing about experiences. I was devouring those, and kind of decided early on in my life that was going to be a path for me. I was going to go in the military, so didn't work out to be. Marines couldn't guarantee me that I'd be a Marine infantryman. That's what I wanted to do. Army could guarantee that. Gave me a unassigned Ranger contract. Had a really good mentorship from the drill sergeant or the recruiters, and ultimately went into the Army a couple weeks after I graduated from high school. I was still 17, with an unassigned Ranger contract. Met phenomenal people in basic training. Went to a place called Harmony Church at Fort Benning, old school World War II barracks. It personified every great movie that I ever saw, and lived up and exceeded every single expectation that I wanted. And as we've talked previously, there's so much glory in just pain and suffering. And, at that time, summer of '83, no air conditioning, no screens, high humidity, bugs, mosquitoes, but every bite and every bead of sweat was just I knew I was growing as a human. Vietnam vet, senior drill sergeant, brand new E6 from the modern Army, the all-volunteer Army. I mean, it was just a incredible experience. Hit airborne school. And when you talk about just things that happen in your life outside of your control, on my first jump, I sprained my ankle really bad. Had good friends that taped it up for me, because we were in a short week with Columbus Day weekend. So I was able to kind of mask that, get through airborne school, but was not convinced that I would make it through RIP. At the time, it was Ranger Indoctrination Program. Today, it's Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. But was not convinced I could go from airborne school to RIP and be successful. So we took the optional 10 days leave, a group of us, and we woke up at a hotel in Savannah, Georgia, the airport, on 25 October 1983. Turned on the news. Back in the day when there's like 3 channels, and there used to be a little dial on a TV that you could change the channel with. The remote looked a lot like a kid younger than you that had to walk up to the TV and change the channel. I was that remote for years. But we turn it on, and there's this big map on, and it says, 1st and 2nd Ranger Battalion jumped into Grenada early morning, October 25th. So this incredible warrior that I'm still very good friends with, and I jump in a cab and run down to RIP. However, we figured that out at the time, fully knowing that certainly 1st Ranger Battalion would not be successful without our service. So we had to get there ASAP. Turn the tide of Operation Urgent Fury. Of course, RIP instructors, young E6s, completely pissed off. They didn't get to jump into combat. Welcomed us with open arms. Smoked us for a bit in Class A's, threw us back in a cab, told us to go check in at Fort Stewart and come back in a couple of days. So what was that experience like? First real day in the Army, incredible organization, trained for, ready for combat, jumps into combat. And then, we come back a couple days later, keep working through RIP. The instructors, absolutely professional, thinking that they're going to have to send us forward. They already knew about casualties that were occurring. But I'll tell you, in theme with this is 1st Ranger Battalion came back sometime right before Thanksgiving, sometime sometime mid-November. My first jump with 1st Ranger Battalion, those people that had jumped into Grenada, was on 6th December 1983. We jumped into Fort Bragg. They didn't come back and do anything other than what they do all the time, and that's clean all their gear, put it back in the arms room. Probably had a long weekend, maybe, and then they got back to training because there wasn't a whole lot to discuss. What they had done prior worked, not flawlessly. They had to pivot a lot, be resilient, right? Execute, and they came back, and it wasn't like stand down for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, 6 months. It was, hey, we got training planned, and we're jumping into Bragg for the week of, I think it was December 6th, might have been 8th, something like that, but the first week of December. They'd been back from Grenada for 2 weeks. Probably had Thanksgiving weekend, and then we went up there in the first couple of days of December, got integrated into our units and packed our shit, and we're jumping into Grenada with these absolute phenomenal warriors. So, that foundation. My section leader, Mike Matt, still a close friend, was one of the few enlisted guys to get a Bronze Star V, and he was a son of a man who had 5 combat tours, 1 in Korea and 4 in Vietnam. And we all know, some people had 2 years in Vietnam, a couple had 3, very few had 4 years in Vietnam. But his dad did. His dad seemed, from everything I heard, incredible warrior. And he told his son, my first section leader, hey son, if you get the opportunity to go to combat, be prepared and have fun, because the opportunities don't come around very often. And he's telling this is a guy that spent 5 years in combat, saying they don't come around very often. And then of course all of us lived through the global war, and came around more often probably than we cared for. But the point is that preparation and having fun. And throughout my career, I understood combat is a lot funner if you're prepared, and if you're prepared, you're a lot more resilient to the trials and tribulations of combat. So, that's kind of a diatribe on the background, and I did spend 4 years in 3 months in Savannah. A year of that was on a kind of a brigade support staff as I was transitioning, but it was phenomenal leaders, phenomenal NCOs, effects-based organization of, hey, I don't care if you got a GED and you're from country, X, or you're, from state, you're from a wealthy family, any demographic, it didn't matter. It was what effects did you deliver. And I was rewarded young age for delivering effects. So turned 18 in Ranger School. Just by happenstance, was able to graduate from Jumpmaster School as a 19-year-old specialist. Only one I've ever known of, airborne, Ranger and Jumpmaster qualified E4, 19 years old, in Ranger Regiment. which afforded me, because I was expendable, so I could have Jumpmaster duties every time, right? And got a lot of experience. But I mean, 19 years old, putting out men twice my age, out of aircraft, flying 130 miles an hour at night was a maturing experience, and I loved it. And I thrived in it and was rewarded with some other schools and opportunities. And I extended for a couple of months. That's why I was in 4 years, 3 months, so I could make E6 and then transition into a really good airborne LURS unit in Nebraska National Guard, all prior service, Jumpmasters, Rangers, phenomenal people. I'm still close friends with many of them today. And then went to UNO, University of Nebraska Omaha, ROTC, got commissioned. And I'll pause this little entree, too long of an introduction, is then I showed up, went through Benning, had a good experience there as an officer, showed up in 101st, 3187 on 1 August 1990. 2 August 1990, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. 7 August, we get alerted to go to Saudi Arabia, first time 101st. Had deployed in probably 20 years. They were not ready. They were not disciplined. Their maintenance sucked. Day one on 1 August, I took over the arms room. Walked down there knowing, former Ranger, knowing rifle companies rotate around rifles. Let me check this out. Open the door. All the weapons were visibly dirty, rusty. Why? Because they came in on Thursday. Care of equipment from our Ranger Creed was not part of their ethos. They put them in there. Nods, nascent nods, early nods, PVS 7s. They were all in cases, damp. And, I wasn't too full of myself, but walked down, talked to the arms room officer, who was a great guy, and the first sergeant, and we rectified that on 1 August. Well, like I say, 2 August, that unit's life started to change. And fortunately, we had Desert Shield to sit out in the desert and train 7 days a week for many, many hours a day to make up for the lack of leadership that had been prevalent in that organization for too long. And ultimately, I think that unit did phenomenal in Desert Storm, but carried a lot of risk leading up to Desert Storm. So, my two first experiences as an enlisted and as an officer were showing up in one unit that was fully prepared, went to combat, came back, normal daily business, and certainly did after action reviews and incorporated what they learned, but they were not shell shocked when they went to Grenada or came back. 101st, not so much. And I'm not bagging on them. It was just a culture, and it was a reality. And maybe there were other units that were, people can contest. We were completely squared away and ready. Okay, we weren't. Objectively, we weren't. And that it was not a good feeling for me as a young leader to lean into potentially going to combat. If you remember at that time, they were anticipating 10,000 U.S. casualties. It was not a good feeling to be a young leader with an untrained organization of really, really great young Americans. So I'll pause there. That long diatribe of, because that went to building the foundation and why I have led and acted like I have, and why Gavin, figured out how to camouflage cadets for the first time in 20 years in the summer of 2018. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
I pause.
there's actually, and I'll let Matt get to the next question we have for you, but it brings back a story too, Bill. It's stuck with me, and probably anybody in my class you could ask, even some of my teammates on the wrestling team. I remember one of your speeches, and I think it was used a few times, but there was a picture up on the screen, and it had a hand coming out of the ground by a tombstone, and it said, "If only I had had the proper training."
Yep.
And I remember you talking about that, and that's just something that always stuck with me because that's something you're not going to get to do. Is, if you either had the training or you didn't, and you don't get to kind of come back and respawn from that. That's something that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, I'm so glad, one, that it did stick with you, and I know it meant something when you were training America's sons and daughters and leading them. And I saw that poster when I was a young Ranger, back when we were, prepping to fight the Soviets, and that was a poster in our dining facility, and I sat in proximity to that most of my days, as a young Ranger, and I never saw that poster again. And that picture you saw was from my company artist in company command in Korea. I asked him, Hammer was his name, so remember him. I said, can you paint that outside my door, outside my office door? And I took that picture before he even finished it, and I never did take a picture of the finished product. And I know that because you can see some of his pencil sketching on the bottom of the picture, but it's a picture of kind of a desolate, or maybe fall or winter, graveyard with that skeletal hand coming out of it saying, if only I had had the proper training. And that, I mean, that kind of brings tears to my eyes right now. I mean, it does, about, um, that's what we owe, right? We don't owe people to be home with their wife and their kids. Some people confuse that. I mean, it's nice to find the balance, but what we owe them is first class training, and we owe them to be prepared so after the mission they can come home to that wife and kid. And I didn't always get that balance right, but I got it right enough, in my mind, that hand doesn't haunt me as much as it could. So.
I mean, to that, Bill, before I ask you the question, we were talking John Troxel a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
He had talked about we conflate balance, and we should have more of a it's not a balance, it's a rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Because when
Yeah.
like when you're at work, and most of us spend about 8 hours a day, and some a little bit more. So there's no such thing as balance, especially when you have 5 of those days a week you're at work. So there is no balance. But if you find a nice rhythm, and
Yeah.
you with that rhythm, so at home you're in a nice rhythm at home, and when you're at work you're in a nice rhythm, so that when you have the time to spend with your family, you're in that nice rhythm. So he challenged us, and I think what most of us didn't understand is finding the great rhythm. You found the
Yeah.
rhythm where if I'm training you the right way, when you're on vacation, you're enjoying your vacation with your family because you spent the time training, and then when you deploy, you did what you had to do. When you come home, you can be home fully there, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, for your family. And I mean, just I know that was yes, a long introduction, but I think it's really good set us up for the, really the first question or the second question. Your career really required immense discipline from like day one. I mean, you're talking about Ranger Regiment. That is a disciplined, organized unit. We know everybody has their down days, but for the most part, when people hear Ranger Regiment, they know that's a disciplined organization ready to do the nation's bidding. Um, my question is, how did you define, if you will, or what is your role? What role did discipline play in shaping your leadership style?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when you talk about and let me back up for a second. I mean, when you mention, our senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, John Troxel, and I was privileged throughout my career to have many conversations with him and kind of follow him and learn from him. Even when I was at comparatively senior ranks, just a phenomenal leader. And I'm going to steal that whole rhythm thing, vice balance too. So, I'll give him credit, but I'm gonna use that shamelessly. And what's the role of discipline? So in the 80s, First Ranger Battalion, the Ranger Battalions were created by General Abrams to create a core, largely a core of NCOs, but a core of leaders that could know what right looks like, understand standards and discipline, and not stay in the regiment or in the battalions at that time, but disseminate throughout the regular army that had a decimated NCO corps and raise the standards throughout. So in 1st Ranger Battalion at the time, and I'm sure it was the same in 2nd that came online a year or so later, or months later, is it was practiced discipline. It was, continuously developing processes and SOPs and leaders holding people accountable. And it was just an incubator for that. So there were very set and known standards that were enforced. And if you failed to meet the standards, you would be removed from that organization and put in the regular army. And at that time, I mean, we'd have cadences that went to the fact we didn't want to be in a regular army. It was a scary place. We were indoctrinated into that is not a place you want to be until it's time for you to go there as a leader and raise the standards of another organization. So, we were talking about this. I've never been a good runner. I've always made it from point A to point B. But as much PT as we did, and we ran our tails off back then, and most Rangers, it seemed like were 140-pound Division I athletes, and I'm built more for holding ground than running across it. So I had to practice running all the time, and I hated it. But what I would have hated worse is not to meet the standard and leave the organization. We're on a 2-hour recall, days before cell phones, pagers, and stuff. Had a system of signing out, calling back in. But I mean, if we were alerted, and we do this routinely, get alerted on a Saturday night and just come in and do a road march just to see if we could, I guess. But that was part of the culture, and then you get a DUI, you're going to be leaving. So figuring it out as a young guy, because we could drink at a young age in Georgia at that time, at 18 was drinking age. And you had to have a designated driver or cab or figure it out or walk, or risk getting kicked out of the organization. So the role of discipline with credible leaders that walked the walk, epitomized the standards, lived the standards, exampled the standards, was a phenomenal place to grow up. And as you asked, kind of lay that foundation of discipline. So you realize discipline wasn't onerous, but discipline was an asset, and discipline, in all things of life made you more credible. So I think that those were kind of my initial pulls out of the Ranger Battalion. And again, that was another layer after my grandfathers and my dad laid a pretty good foundation. And I was not a perfect kid, man. I was getting disciplined. I was understanding discipline. I mean, there used to be this thing that the kids would get grounded, right? And that means stay inside the fence. And that was, I mean, that was absolute torture for me, right? But yeah, I got discipline for sure at an early age. Learned the power of it. So
I was talking to my wife about this. I think it was the other night, because oldest boy right now is 17. He's recovering from the flu. So last weekend, my 3 little ones came over. They said, here's the flu. And then they left. And the rest of us got the flu. And then we were talking, and we were saying, the worst thing was I had 2 options my mom would give me. She's like, hey, you can either be on punishment or you get a spanking. And so, like, I'll take the spanking. It was a trick. So I got both. And then you can hear for summertime, kids playing outside, and someone ring on the doorbell. Can DeAndre come out and play? And she's like, no, he cannot. And I thought, like, I gotta spank it. She's like, no, you're in punishment too. You think you're gonna get off easy? So,
see, I would have fell for that every time too. I'll take the, whatever you want to call as spanking, that ass whooping. If that's freedom outside the fence, I'll take that multiple times. We'd do that every day.
I'll take that. I mean, this actually, because I write this down. Discipline was an asset, and I was thinking, where did you learn it? And you answered it. You're like, my grandfather and my father, provided me that discipline, which became an asset, which propelled you to be able to serve in a great organization and continue with a great career. To our second portion is talking about resilience, discipline under pressure. Resilience and discipline go hand in hand, especially in high stakes environments, which you can attest to being in part of those in your military career and even as a civilian now. How did you instill these values in the soldiers you led?
Yeah. And I think this is a really good question, and for me at least, to clarify, in my mind, I think discipline's required to develop resilience, but discipline in of itself does not increase resilience. And I think about, and I'm not bagging on them, it's just an observation, is I've been privileged to serve with a number of really top tier athletes, Division I athletes, some Olympic hopefuls, people that were just right on the cusp. And heck, in fact, we had them in at West Point, right on the cusp of being pros. And they were disciplined in their diet, their workout, their training, their sleep. But when their world was disrupted, no protein drinks, no special diet, workout schedule disrupted by me taking them to the field, or their facilities weren't available, and sleep was disrupted, and they go from 6 or 7 uninterrupted hours to 2. Some of them can't function, or can't function to scale, if you will, and can't endure. And to me, they haven't developed. They have discipline, but they haven't developed resilience, which I think are definitely two different things. So, I do feel it takes discipline to think through. You got to have discipline to think through hardship, and then train through that hardship. Like what are the hardest things that we're going to face, whether it's in the corporate world, it's in your civilian world, in your hobbies, in your life. Is what are those hardships that could come? Now add something. Could those hardships be even worse than that, harder than that? And then kind of think through. I say, like, when it's sunny and 70 on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, if you think through these things, you come up with some pretty damn good courses of action for dealing with them. If you've thought through them and then trained through them in different ways, whether it's training for an ultra marathon or training to go, for combat, but you train through them and make that hard, I think that helps build resilience. So I worked diligently and took pride in providing planned, resourced, just arduous training at much higher levels than most of the people I served with, and some can push back, but I'll stick with that. Enjoyed hard PT, and when I was a company commander in Korea, it was always, it's 30 below and windy, we're going to cancel PT. And my mantra was, hey, do we have that agreement with the North Koreans? No fighting in the cold. We got that agreement in place. No, we're going to do PT every day. One day it was 30 degrees and blowing, and I did cut it from like 90 to 60 minutes. But I mean, we were out there every day, and my company took a lot of pride in that. Of, no, we're going out there and we're going to do arduous training in arduous terrain, environments, weather, so I think doing those things, really focusing on good training, multi-echelon, scenario-driven, arduous, complex training, all these buzzwords brief well in training meetings. They're a little bit harder to execute consistently, but if we do that, I think we build this. And the last thing I'll say on this is Sal Junta, first living Medal of Honor awardee since Vietnam, and he served in the battalion I commanded. He's one of 3 living Medal of Honor awardees from that tour. And in one of his first interviews, Sal said, I quote, "I did what I did because that's what I was trained to do," unquote. I'm pretty proud of that quote. I use it in training what I do in civilian life. I use it in a lot of presentations with a picture of that young warrior and man on there. But I did what I did because that's what I was trained to do. So as leaders, whether in the corporate world or in the military, if you're disappointed in the performance of your teammates, you just might want to take a long pause in the mirror and ask them, did I tell them what their job description is? Do I have roles and responsibilities? Have I trained them to that? Have I ensured they understood what the outcomes and the standards were? And if you can answer yes to all those things, and the person still disappointed you, maybe it's time for retraining, or maybe they don't have the capability to learn and perform. But when I peel this onion back many times, whether in the military or in the corporate world, there aren't clear roles and responsibilities. People are exceptional at saying, you did that wrong. They're not as exceptional at saying, hey, these are my expectations. You know, these are your responsibilities. This is your training package. I'm going to hold you to account to this. And that's a disconnect. That's a disconnect. And that's not a direct or an employee or a soldier's problem. That's a leader problem. So I'll pause there. Long answer again to short question.
Look, it's perfect. I remember when I was a lieutenant, the second lieutenant, I met Sal just before leaving Italy and headed to Germany, then Afghanistan, and I asked him, and he said, all I did was respond, man, like to that. He was like, I saw what they were doing, and I had to respond.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, and that's, so that's perfect. So that's amazing. Extreme, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mac, and all three, Kyle White, Ryan Pitts, and Sal, in their own way in different interviews, have basically made the comment, I did what any one of my peers would have done. I did, any one of my peers would have done it. Most of my peers did more than I did. Very, very humble, but in self-effacing. But I believe every single one of them had that level of confidence in their training and teammates, in their relationships, that they did believe everybody would have done the same thing in the same circumstances. And that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. And to comment kind of further on that too, Bill, you're absolutely right. And like you said, you should be damn proud of that. That's amazing, especially to have them all have that common theme, because you're absolutely doing your job. Some of the events we've done, Chad used pretty much an identical analogy of what you talked about. He said, hey, he's like, go look in a mirror, pull out your phone and have it facing you. And if you can look at that and say, hey, if I was my kid, I would follow me, or if I was my soldier,
Yeah.
I'd follow me. And if you're not able to answer that, or the husband, if I was, my husband, whatever, I'd follow me if you were a wife, and if you can't answer that, I mean, the answer, like you
Yeah.
know what you need to work on at that point. So I just thought it's very interesting observations, simultaneous.
Well, and we've all been at the level of, some of the smartest people in the Army are privates and second lieutenants, right? And I don't even mean that sarcastically, because they have no frame of reference. So they haven't been indoctrinated into the system to start caveating it. Well, we got to just do this because it's dumb and we do dumb things. I mean, and I rail against that all the time, right? No, I don't do dumb things and don't train people to do dumb things. But unfortunately, as we go up, and I talk to cadets about this, hey, you're all masterful at critiquing your peer leaders and but learn from them. If you don't like the leadership, learn from it and don't emulate it. The problem we have everywhere in leadership is you have this perfect 20/20 vision when you're a second lieutenant. You learn the lesson, but then you choose to emulate the stupidity when you're a company commander. Not you, but people get lazy and they justify it. Well, now I understand why that company commander stayed in garrison all the time and didn't train us. And yeah, it makes sense to me that he sat behind his desk and just did email and never walked around the area and, talked to whoas and, and they just emulate that. And then, but they don't realize, again, pulling out your phone, would you follow you? They don't realize necessarily that, no, what I've done is I've turned into that person that I reviled and that I thought was weak. And that's a challenge. I mean, that's a challenge for people. And I'm not saying I have all the answers to that, but I tried not to emulate the people I didn't respect. That was a conscious effort to do that. And so
it brings up you saying that brings up another quote that you used to always say that I loved, and it was you'd always say that hua and intellect are not mutually exclusive. That was always one of my favorite things to hear. I was like, I have to wrap my mind around it, a little bit, but I thought that was super funny and so true too.
Well, when I was in the social department as a captain, again, non-West Pointer, but I to this day believe I am one of the most ardent supporters of that institution. And as a diatribe, I say, hey, when our nation is in peril, the graduates of the United States Military Academy will be tasked to navigate our country out of peril. And we've been in peril twice, to my knowledge, in the Civil War, in West Pointers led on both sides, and in World War II. And West Pointers held the preeminent positions throughout that war and navigated us out of peril. Doesn't mean I think the organization's perfect, but I don't have any bad memories from West Point. None, zero. Every day that I served as a captain and as DMI 6, I was smiling, laughing, and motivated by both peers I worked with, directs I had, and especially by the cadets. But I did serve in the social department when they had 6 Rhodes Scholars and in there, and they put a premium on classroom intellect and thought if you actually did PT 5 days a week and hung out with DMI and Hank Kersey at the time. I don't even know who DMI 6 was when I was there, but the deputy was Hank Kersey, a hell of a warrior. Son grew up to be the Ranger Regimental commander, just changed out. But if you hung out with DMI, you were not quite as smart, and that's when I started putting that on a slide and using it all the time. That
Defense
who
and
and intellect are
strategic
not
studies.
mutually exclusive. Yeah, and some people believed it, some didn't. But hey, I'll stick with it. I am impressed. You remember that though, so I like that.
So this other question I have. In extreme conditions, whether in combat or high pressure corporate settings, how did you maintain mental discipline and avoid decision fatigue? Because, I mean, you've been through it.
Yeah, I think these things kind of build on each other, right? And, we can't build resilience when we're in extreme circumstances. I think people hope for the best and just hope it all works out sometimes. But if you train in mentally script and think through real hardships and almost commit yourself to either working your way through those or training so you're better at working your way through those, I think people are better off if they do that. So we always try to train harder than we anticipate combat is. And I ran a pre-ranger program when we were in a basic course, and it was with another prior enlisted ranger qualified guy. And I mean, we were smoking some hard PT at that time on Saturdays. Like I remember this one last road march out by Fryer Field, up this big hill up towards Fryer Drop Zone, or Lawson Field up there, up into Alabama, came back down, and I think we averaged, and we were ruck running and stuff too, but we averaged like 11.
Cardiac Hill.
Yeah, well, it was cardiac there, but then all the way past Lawson, and then up towards Fryer Drop Zone, across the Chattahoochee, and
Whiskey
and,
too,
I mean,
I think.
yeah, it was really like it was a bigger hill than cardiac, right? And then we come back, and pace on our last one was like 11:39, and I was feeling pretty good. It was about 8 miles. And some guys go to Ranger School, and some people came back after graduation going right straight through, which was pretty good for second lieutenants. Came back pissed off. Hey, that pre-ranger, that was a lot harder than ranger school.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm
that's
like,
pretty good.
yeah, I'm like, the follow on is what? Ranger qualified second lieutenant. I mean, is that a good thing? And I said, what is the lesson there? Train harder than you expect, the main event to be, and ideally it's not as hard. So, but I think we also have to build our team in like that. We did it as a team, right? And we trained with them, and you build teammates holistically in sustaining the team. And, I have this in my corporate world. We have events that, certainly in the civilian world, for the most part, you're paid 8 hours a day. But we have calls routinely where I have people working for extended periods of time to navigate us through some stuff. But we always got to be conscious of sustaining the team. And we start asking that really early on, right? Is okay, everybody wants to be at the table right now, but we're going to have to sustain this event. So, how do we sustain the team and not all fatigue to exhaustion at the same time? And, I've got a few examples where I was up 72, a couple times 96 hours, and people are like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, yeah, you can. It is humanly possible to be up until you fall over dead. I mean, I can guarantee that can happen. But and then empowering the teammates, training our teammates so that, I don't have to be there on all the time. I had phenomenal field grades, but hell, on a bad day, a PFC was controlling all the fires and casualty evac. That's Kyle White, was Medal of Honor awardee. PL was killed in opening salvo of a horrendous ambush, and the kid was coming in and out of 19 years old, coming in and out of consciousness, calling for fires, calling medevac, assembling everybody. So why was he able to do that? He didn't just figure it out. He was trained, and he had watched great leaders operate for months before that happened, and he was empowered, and he knew he could make decisions. And again, for your audiences, civilian teams can do this. I mean, my job is to plan, train, exercise, AAR, track action items, and do validations along with learning development. But civilian organizations can do all this as readily as the military, to just train and prepare people before the bad day. So
we really look at for our company is helping people build resilience, and I think that's because a lot of us had those setbacks.
Yeah,
and we know companies and individuals are going to have setbacks. What are strategies that have worked for you to overcoming setbacks, to continue to instill that resilience within yourself or within those that you lead or you led and are leading?
yeah. Something that I would share with directs in conversations as we prep to deploy, and certainly when I was training cadets up at West Point, and I've shared it in some training forums here, is when we're talking about facing adversity, I think people need to know the answers to 3 questions. And again, they need to sort this out when they're sitting on their couch watching football with a beer in their hand, no threat, just sort it out ahead of time. And that is, what do you stand for? What's your framework? And how do you want to be remembered? And I think if you truly are introspective and know what you stand for, what's your framework, and how you want to be remembered, I think that goes a long way to performing well in adversity. And I have the answers to those questions, and they have steeled my soul in some really, really tough times. But secondly, I think people got to reconcile that life is not fair, but neither is death. And a story I share is I went into a 15-month tour as a commander, Kunar, Nuristan province, Afghanistan. In the military, we have a very deliberate process where one unit might be holding the ground, another unit's coming in to replace them. We have a structured process. When I came in, I learned from a great man, Chris Cavoli, 4-star general, SAC year commander. He's a phenomenal battalion commander and peer. I got to ride around with him for a week, and then I got to ride around with him. He rode around with me for a week, keeping me straight, telling me what I'm doing right and wrong and how I could do things better was his mantra. But eventually we changed guidons. And on 5 June, about 10 o'clock in the morning, we changed guidons. Chris got to go home after a 16-month deployment. And 6 hours later, we'd been in a few firefights leading up to this, but 6 hours later, we were in a horrendous firefight. It was 5 June 07. And I always know this, 05, 06, 07. 5 June 07. Get the word that we have a KIA 6 hours into our 15-month tour. As it pans out, it was empirically my youngest paratrooper, first KIA under my command. He was the son of another former Ranger, a man I respected immensely, who happened to be our brigade sergeant major. And his oldest son was killed under my command 6 hours into a 15-month tour. So I share that because if life was fair, Timothy Biamoto and I would both have 3 years in combat. We'd both be alive or we'd both be dead. But death isn't fair either. So when people are struggling with resilience and things start going through their head about, oh, this isn't fair, Max got better than me and Gavin had this advantage, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody told you, and if somebody did, they lied. Nobody told you life's not fair, but all of us can look back and see how death hasn't been fair. Think about the kid in your high school that got killed in a car accident. Think of that one that died of cancer. The kid walking around the hallways with bald head, going through chemotherapy, sucking down the pain, and still died before he graduated. Think about the young kids that get killed in a combat. Think about all those people that have died on aircraft in the last 5 weeks. So life's not fair, but neither's death. Get your arms around that. And then, kind of last thing that we had that I've stolen from Gladiator 1, Marcus Aurelius, is what we do in life echoes in eternity. If what you do in life is whine and cry, okay, that's how you're going to be remembered. How do I want to be remembered? I whined and cried and complained and bitched at every single opportunity. That's my legacy. That's what I want to echo in eternity. Or do you want to be remembered as an awesome teammate? Do you want to be remembered as a leader people would follow, beg to follow into the gates of hell? Do you want to be remembered as the best dad? That goes back to turning your phone around. Okay, I want to be the best dad. Okay. Will your kids follow you? Do your kids want to follow you? Do they want to be like you? So those things kind of go together, those 3 questions. I think reconciling life's not fair, neither is death. And we get a vote on what we do in life echoes in eternity. So I think those things, for me at least, have something to do with resilience.
That's really good. We constantly having these conversations where I'm in education now, and then definitely having kids, and like something's not fair. It's like I don't know where that comes from. Like that, this is just part of life. You're not going to always get your way, but I definitely 100% agree with you. You get a decision, you get a vote, and if you decide not to vote, guess what? Whatever comes your way, you own up. You better own it, because you didn't take any type of action. It wasn't disciplined about your own life. So don't expect somebody else to take it easy on you, or don't expect life to take it easy on you. Leadership is like definitely in action, and all of us know this. And the role of discipline is success. You talked about that, and I wanted you to repeat that statement. You said discipline is required for resilience, but is not guaranteed for resilience.
I think that's about it. I mean, it's a better summary, I think, is that I think it is required, but it doesn't. Discipline in and of itself doesn't lead to resilience. Not at least not in the way
Hmm.
I consider resilience. Now, if I was if I was an Army football player and did all these things, which by the way, I am a huge fan of Army, not just Army football, but just that whole program, and I can go on about that. I ran across a lot of people that thought the football players got over, and I just wanted, and I said it to many people, is, hey, when they're getting over at 5:15 in the morning and heading up the hill to link up with Coach Monken, jump on board. Jump on board. Then go earn your Chick-fil-A that you get before game day, because all you see is the Chick-fil-A. You don't see what all the hours that they spent, that other people. But I'm a big defender of Army football
Has
players.
to lose weight before they commission.
Well,
You think he was
yeah,
getting over? This dude's got to drop weight just to
yeah.
commission.
Well, Randy George, Chief of Staff of the Army, is a great friend of mine. Not name dropping, but if I had his role, there would be a number of things like, before football players made first lieutenant, they'd be a weight, and I would give two shits what weight they go in the Army as, because I think that's criminal enterprise to expect a guy to be 330 pounds and be the best offensive line in America. Oh, but by the way, you're going to be a second lieutenant, infantry officer, and you got to be, 270 in 8 months. That is not holistic fitness. That's stupid fitness.
It was crazy to see them lose weight like they did.
Yeah.
Like, because you'd see them, like, they had that deadline, Bill, and it was like,
Yeah.
hey, by the time you commission, like, you got to be down here, and you'd see them like outrun. You'd see them just throwing the weight off, and I don't know what they were taking and they had this extreme caloric deficit, but yeah, it was pretty amazing to see that.
And again, hey, yeah, you want to bitch because they got Chick-fil-A before the game and you didn't? Yeah. Well, I don't see a lot of people on those bikes for 2 hours a day in a rubber suit either, trying to destroy themselves. I don't agree with with that whole process again, and I've only got an inkling of being built to hold ground compared to our nationally renowned offensive line, but I think the Army would be okay if they all came in, 60 pounds over and had 2 years to lose 60 pounds. I think United States of America would be okay with that.
Like,
Yeah, we went into that too. Like, I remember it was the same thing that you probably saw it,
wrestlers.
Bill, is like
Yeah.
is the core squatters versus the regular, well, let's say regular cadet, like the cadets that didn't play a Division I sport, and it's like they get all these privileges and stuff, and it's like, hey, if you want to take my shirt for a day, take my shoes, and
Yep.
like you go give me a day off, that's fine. I'll do that, but I'm grinding my teeth, especially me as a poor performing academic cadet. I had to grind my teeth everywhere. And Mac knows, we've talked about when I was going through CDQC at the time with some of my teammates and wrestling and doing school. I mean, that's stuff that, like, I still, go back to today, because I mean, like, the suffering, the long suffering that I was exposed to helped me out more than, a lot of things that I could even, think back to. It's an experience.
It's funny, and I know we're digressing, but maybe this goes to resilience and discipline. But one of my first briefings is DMI 6. People are telling me the rules of the road, right? And I'm like mildly interested. And one of the things that made my head like snap around was they said, we're gonna like quit doing CDQC. And like I'd been in the job like 8 minutes, right? And I'm like, nah, that shit ain't happening. Because Dave Bernstein was one of my cadets when I was a captain, and ultimately died in 173rd on 18 October 2003 in an ambush when I was a Brigade 3. All unique demographics. Number 5 in his class, a Jewish cadet. Not a big population out of the Corps, and he was a Division I swimmer, and he was CDQC, and they have Gavin, the Bernstein workout and stuff, that it's all posted up in the pool, and I just was not going for that. And of course we had Steve Gillen, who was, I mean, it wasn't even a blip on his radar. Nah, no kidding. And in fact, in your class, we had Fran Baudet, who was USASOC commander, awesome guy, really formalized the program. So then we got a dive qualified NCO to be coming up, and I hope they sustained it, but we brought them up, and that was going to be part of the USASOC's contribution to making America better. But that is the epitome of discipline. The kids that go through CDQC, the we'll say pre-scuba training, and work for a year, all uber fit. A lot of the wrestlers seemed like we had a higher population of wrestlers doing that as well, just because all that fitness dovetails. But yeah, those kids coming out of that program and going, I think cadets have like the highest graduation rate, or one of the highest graduation rates in the SF combat dive qualification course. Very, very hard physical course. And you got these 20-year-old cadets going down there with great reputation with special forces, NCOs, and yeah, that is a program. And in fact, we got the Halo program kind of somewhat solidified while we were there. I wish I could have worked on that longer, but where the kids could go through from the jump team, which is totally different, jumping into a football stadium and putting on oxygen at 20,000 feet with 100-pound rucksack. But I'm like, shit, if you jumped out of a damn helicopter or airplane 450 times, we can probably get this worked out. And USASOC did a great job for that year of affording opportunity to go to 2-week accelerated free fall, get your Halo wings. I mean, come out as a cadet, Halo qualified. If you keep on the path, okay, get airborne qualified, get Ranger qualified, go be an infantry second lieutenant with all, your doodads. I mean, good on you. Then the kids that could shoot too. I mean, they could shoot better than the NYPD SWAT. I mean, the combat pistol team. I mean, it was phenomenal. So it's good.
Yeah, it was. It's. He listens to this too, but one of my close mentors, and he was, our instructor there, Willie P. Rothrock.
Mm-hmm.
He's down in Jacksonville now. I just stayed with him a few months ago. Because I'm not too far from him, and I shared a lot of the things that I took away from that. And I went down there and was unsuccessful. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
It's the highest success rate. I was 8 of the 10 didn't, 8 of the 10 passed, and I was one of the 2 that didn't for a dumb safety violation. It's like I got through the hardest part, was extremely prepared.
Yeah.
And it kind of like how we were talking before, like about the guys coming back from Ranger school being like that, pre-Ranger was way harder. Like, our MAC course we went through at school was way harder than the school. Like, we went down there and we were in great shape. Like, we were in better shape than a lot of the SF guys, but that's because of what we went through. And, we were very, very prepared to go down and be successful.
Well, and what I liked about that, again, I mean, for the audience, this goes to just an example of a program that instills discipline, because these cadets, how many times? 4 days a week, I think, maybe more.
At
plus
least.
Swimming on your own on the weekends. And what I'm always cognizant about, because I've run pre-Ranger programs, a couple of them, one in 101st and in IOBC, is I'm very cognizant of training people vice hazing people. And with young leaders, you got to be, I mean, they require adult supervision, because kind of motivation and lack of experience can go askew. And I was always so impressed. I mean, Gavin, I was there not every day at all, but I was there routinely, just because I was motivated by them. But the level of professionalism of that cadet run training, with some oversight, of course, was phenomenal. But it goes to discipline, the people coming in and doing that. And hell, in every class, there's a few guys that are going through this the second year in a row, because they're like Gavin, and they did it as a sophomore, had some safety violation, were number 9 of 10, and get sent back, and they volunteer to go back through this for a year again. And those kids, I'm like, regardless whether you get a scuba bubble or not, you're going to be a better human at the end of the
100%.
first year, and a better human if you do it again, regardless of what you're slapping on your uniform at the end of the day. Certainly want that reward, but God, having that discipline to show up and feel that pain and go through that and load shed nonsense is powerful. So,
I was trying to look through and see it. But thinking about, CDQC and that type of discipline, how you saw it with cadets and now being in a corporate world, like how do you build that? Because what we, work through at Beyond a Trek is talk to people about doing something hard every day.
yeah.
Like that's the thing we do. Like we get out. I'm a retired guy, just like yourself, and it's like, other than the week that I'm under the weather, to actually give myself some time to rest. People are like, what do you do at 43 years old? I was like, man, I get up at 4 a.m. I spend some time and I go work out, definitely 5 days a week. So
Yeah.
what is it that you're telling your team at Google, the guys that you're working with, or people that are probably not working with you, and they wanted to build? It's like, Bill, why do you still do what you do?
Yeah. Um, and I'll use the term holistic fitness routinely. And now this year, our team, in fact, Gavin, you know him, Brian Reed, the former BTO, he works with me, right?
That's right.
He's our learning development guy,
Love
and
that.
has really brought what SOCOM and USASOC call Thor 3, where you bring in, we've collected all the assets and benefits that Google has, which is pretty similar to what DoD has. So we have gyms, we have nutritionists, we have masseuses, we have therapists, we have occupational therapists, mental health therapists available. And Brian Reed's brought this Elevate program together to basically have our version of Thor 3 to say, hey, we're not directing you to do these things, but these are all the options you have. My boss is totally into well-being. Great dude. One of the best leaders I've worked for, and I'm not sucking up to him. He knows it. I say it in public forum, compare him to some of the best leaders I've worked for. But he mandated this program called Responder First Aid, and it's a 14-hour certification program that Google pays for, and everybody under his org had to do this. And it's all about like the mechanics of the brain, but also how do we build resilience in the workforce as an individual, but how are we there for the other teammates? Just one little check. Everybody was responsible for doing it. And hell, I got the book right here for the next phase, heart, right here, because high adversity resilience training. So I'll get that signed up and I can send it to you guys. It's phenomenal. Online training. So that's the second phase, and I'll be an RFA instructor only because this is a hobby of mine, is like building resilient teams, right? And this is like good doctrine on that in common sense language. But how do we do it for our teammates? It is more of a challenge in the world, but I think we do it like we did in the Army. How about by example? Everybody in Google knows I do. I'm almost 60 years old, and I go to the gym 7 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, because at least one day every 2 weeks, something's going to come up and take a workout. I got to travel, got to do something, early meeting, whatever. So that's kind of my deal, and that's my time. That's not socialization time. That's my time. And Google's very, very accommodating for that, and I can adjust my hours to make that happen. But I could work out in there. So maybe we example that. And I have high energy at work, and I've got great teammates, and I feed off of some personalities and what we call the mosh pit. That when I'm exhibiting false motivations better than none, that's kind of a theme, right?
Yep.
Is like if you're having a bad day, you're under the weather, you're feeling weak. That's okay. Feel weak. Don't act weak. False motivation's better than none. But when I have that, there's different teammates that I can draw on, and get my energy level up. But then also, I talk very openly, and it's a culture of ours to talk about mental health and well-being um, routinely and openly. And I think that we're an anomaly, both in the corporate world in Google, but we've really got this not a program, but we've got everybody knows about this opportunity. About 2.5 years ago, first of all, if I explain my team, we probably have 100 years of military experience on there, about 50 years of law enforcement, 70 years of corporate security experience. People show up to work with a bunch of trauma and baggage. And that doesn't mean they're weak. It's just a reality. I show up to work with, trauma and baggage. And then we work with bad scenarios all the time, either in training or we're doing an after action review on a bad event, or the bad event happened and we're dealing with it. So about 2 years ago, I mean, it's Google provided service. Everybody can do it, but we started bringing a psych into a team meeting once a quarter, and it is therapeutic. I mean, we learn a lot about teammates. And I know our teammates really well. We've had, family deaths on our team. We've had fires. We've had accidents. Kids get sick. So they have all this baggage. They work with bad stuff. They have life going on. But we get in this room once a quarter, and, virtual and psych in there. She knows us well. And it's just very, very therapeutic for us, and it builds resiliency. Um, and there's tells, and my teammates will probably listen to this, I'm sure, and and it gives me the opportunity as a leader to take some notes. Hey, teammate X mentioned this, and then I can follow up 2 days later in a one-on-one. Hey, I heard you share this, and that's powerful, and I'm here for you, and we can all cover down, and but taking mental well-being, um, I think some organizations, I think the military's gotten through this for the most part, but some organizations equate mental health as I don't know, as a deficiency or just something's wrong or something. They don't look at it like going to the gym. That's how I look at it is, hey, I'm getting better every day. When I talk to, these people, and I don't do it every quarter. I'm not giving you my whole schedule, but I have another little program because I take mental health so seriously. And it to me, it's just like going to the gym is exercising demons out of my muscles in the gym and out of my mind in these different forms, and like I said, my personal study that I do. In the Army we have what, 3 pillars of development. You have institutional, learn a bunch of shit in school, right? We have organizational, learn a bunch of stuff in your organization, and then we have self-study. And that's where you're supposed to do your own assessment. And I'm looking over here at different books and stuff, and do your own assessment and say, hey, these are my personal gaps. How am I going to be better at that? So when I turn that camera around as one of my sons, or I turn that camera around as one of my teammates, am I a guy that they can respect and follow? Well, if I close some of those gaps, today, tomorrow, the next day, I'm hoping more people answer yes than answered 3 days ago.
So, it's just like I was thinking about like peak performance. Would you um, say that leads to your ability to continue to perform at the level that you've been performing at? Is being able to look at yourself holistically, especially like physically, like, hey, physically I'm here. Mentally, I know what I need to do for my job.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that even, being a prior military, some things that they didn't touch on a lot was that spiritual
Yeah.
fitness. Is what is the practice that you do? It could be that book, or it could be meditation, because I take some meditation time. Maybe if you maybe read a scripture or something like that
Hmm.
that keeps you focused to continue to perform at a peak level.
Yeah, and that's a great question because I think if all of us had a bar napkin and we wrote down what are the components of holistic fitness, we'd probably be 80% the same and 20% different, right? But I think spiritual for some, it's the most important, right? And personally, being transparent with the audience is, that's an identified gap for me because I've cycled in and out and in and out, and I've made excuses, and I've gotten great things from the Catholic Church, great things from non-denominational chaplains. Reading about like Buddhist stuff is, I mean, that's kind of fascinating to me. I mean, I'm not shaving my head and moving to a monastery tomorrow, but I can read the, well, I got it, not disrespecting, but ain't doing it, but not disrespecting. But you get it. I'm not an extremist on that, but I'm inclusive. I've got more books on I think Islam up here than anybody I know, at least like a third of that top shelf, because I could not understand. I tried. And I still can't. I mean, I can talk about Sunni and Shia and this and that. I cannot understand that religion. I understand the principles are just like others. If you go back, and I would talk to people in Afghanistan in shuras, and I knew Muhammad's wife was a businesswoman and a politician. They didn't. And I knew when her birthday was. They didn't. Didn't happen to make it out of the Pakistani madrasa into the Korengal Valley, but and I'd bring these this isn't even about your question, but
Yeah,
I took all the most beautiful mosques in America and had pictures on this thing that I could roll out laminated, and I'm like, some way or shape or form, you think my country doesn't respect your religion? Tell me which mosques in Afghanistan look like this. Okay, tell me. And that was a powerful message for them, for those people. But again, it spiritually going to, hey, I respect your beliefs. Try to understand them. Don't, but try to. And am transparent about it. And most of us were told when we were overseas, hey, don't discuss religion. That's another one of those things I just blew off, right? I talked about every single shirt. I have Islam for Dummies right up here, and I could pull up the timeline. We have internet, right? What's the most important day in Islam? Or what happened on this day in Islam? Go out to Shura. Hey, you know what this day is, right? It's Muhammad's wife's birthday. Woo! And then we'd talk about that for 15 minutes, and that really made Shuras go well. It helped instead of me going in there asking or telling them what I needed from them. But anyways, that wasn't to your question, but I think holistic fitness, if we go into the fight mentally, physically, nutritionally, spiritually, as healthy as we can be on that day, we're probably going to be more resilient going through that particular event, whether that event is 4 hours long or 4 days long. I think all of holistic fitness will make us better in the fight, in the arena, whatever we're involved in, corporate or military.
we I did send we sent you some questions, but and I noticed I didn't really touch on like trust, and I wanted to make sure I touch on trust because I think that's one of that cornerstone as an individual. How do you build trust in your organization that you commanded, and then in the organization as you're leading now?
Yeah, I think a few things is, I really did attempt to lead by example on a daily basis, and I am a management by walk around guy. I learned early on in my career 90% of the things that hit my inbox are nonsense. And if I don't do anything with them, nobody cares. But if I want to and I learned this in company command before email is, I was always in the field or doing something other than sitting in my office, and all this stuff would pile up in my office. And then like Friday, when I'd finally get around to it, most of it was OBE, overcome by events, right? I could just throw it away. But had I been in my office, I'd probably be working for some staff officer, right? Like he's like, hey, we need this. Oh, roger that. I don't work for staff officers. I work for the battalion commander. You know, if it comes from him, he was great. If he really needed some stuff, he'd have somebody track me down, and that happened like once. But for the most part, it was all just like nonsense busy work. And same with the email makes that exponentially more true. But just kind of management by walking around. I think a couple of things, knowing myself and what I've known since I was a little boy is I actually have a conscience. And I know what guilt is. I have Catholic guilt, right? Means I doesn't mean I'm even close to perfect. I'm really not a good person most days, I guess. But at least I feel bad about it. You know, I know it. I know it. I'm aware. I'm aware.
That's good, dude. That's
But
good.
but
Speaks
but I
for all
marry,
of us.
yeah. But I marry that with I'm also not a hypocrite. So if I do something against my values and judgment, what I believe that camera should show me, I again I feel bad and I try not to do that. And the last thing about my personality is I have this thing in my mind that like I remember really how my dad said things when I was a little boy, whether it was a compliment or a, you know, kind of a correction, how that impacted me. And I remember that when I was a young soldier, you know, that section leader, I look up over here because at my retirement, my section leader from 40 some years prior or 40 years prior gave me a Afghanistan rifle, you know, one that he bought, came to my retirement. It was very, very special to me, as is that person. Um, but I remember when, so I tried not to talk to, and this goes to building trust, I try not to talk to people in a condescending manner because I do not like that and it pisses me off. If people, you know, that whole who an intellect thing, if people try to talk to me like I'm a dumbass, it doesn't work out well for me. And I get exercised about that. But I'm not perfect. And, you know, share a story with people is, when I was ROC 6, the battalion commander of 2nd of the 503rd, we were getting ready to do our deployment order. And I got called to the brigade commander's office, just, hey, come over, I got to talk about this. Roger that, I move out. Well, the deployment order was supposed to start at 1300. I didn't get back till 1320. And my S3 and XO, as they should, were doing the order. But got pissed off over in that office, and that pissed offness didn't work off by the time I got in there. So I bust in the office. There's, you know, teammates from all over, and they're doing exactly what they should be doing. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on? You know, how can you go by my intent without me giving it? And I slam the door and I walk out and I go to my office. And that was like 180 out from everything that I stood for, right? And everything. And I'm just like, what in the, you know, these people are doing exactly what I would expect and what I'm going to expect and what I'm going to need them to do. And I'm, you know, doing this. And it was like 3 minutes later, I come back in, everybody's kind of looking down on this and that. And I'm like, let's stop. I mean, I'm pushing reset and, you know, really apologize to the whole office and my S3 and XO who were phenomenal, still are great friends. One of them works for me now, works with me. And the 3 does. And, you know, and we just had to level set before we went into a 15-month tour. But it really built trust, right? Because, I mean, you know, was pretty proud of myself every day, but I could humble myself, needed to humble myself in front of that audience, not pull them in afterwards and go, yeah, hey, kind of, I'm sorry, I kind of screwed that up, because that wasn't going to empower them. I mean, in front of people. So later on in life, when I was DMI 6, I wrote an article about trust and leadership, and the themes were, hey, we got to train and trust our subordinates, support them, and then own the bad and pass the good. So, and I try to, you know, articulate that in our training here is we've got to train you. We've got to trust you. We're going to have to trust you on a bad day when we're not there. We got to trust you on the good days too. but support them. And I also tell the directs and the people in the fight that, I'm going to support you, but I'm relying on you to use every ounce of your education, your training, your experience, your resources, the time available you have to make the best decisions. And, it's kind of mutually supportive or complementary. You do the very best you can with the tools you have and the time, and I am absolutely 100% obligated to have your back and just own anything that goes sideways. And I think I have a track record of this, and with Battle of Wanat, and I'll pass the good. And I'm not trying to take credit for what you do. How is that easier? Well, it's easier, again, like we talked about. If we have processes, SOPs, doctrine, we train on them, train on doctrinal stuff to standard. We empower subordinates to do the very best that they can. Encourage initiative. And people use the word prudent risk taking. Well, prudent is defined by time available. What's the threat? What's the threat? The time available, the training, the resources. That all feeds into prudent risk taking. I mean, if you have no experience and no resources, there's not a lot of prudence that can be applied. But if you're extremely competent at your job and experienced, prudent can stretch quite a bit, right? Prudence can stretch quite a bit. I think, to build trust, we got to learn from others. I say in this world and in the previous world, we can't afford for all of us on this screen to learn all the same mistakes, right? Okay, Mac, you get a couple soldiers killed. Okay, did you learn from that? Good. Well, Gavin, you go get two more soldiers killed and learn the same lesson. No, that's not what we do. We do the ARs, but we build them into process then. And how do we not, step on IEDs? How do we clear IEDs when we're, moving quickly to a sport by fire position? In the corporate world, how do we not set up our directs or teammates to get smashed by, another director in another section over here? We've already learned this lesson. We know his personality. We know he wants to blame our team for all of his team's incompetence. How do we prevent that ambush from happening? Or do we just say, hey, that was freaking awesome watching Matt get smashed by that director. Wait till Gavin gets up there. I bet that's going to be a blood splatter. No, we try to learn from others. And I think in the corporate world, I don't know, well, corporate world and the military, we've also got to be honest about rewarding excellence and not mediocrity. And I think organizations struggle with that, rewarding excellence, really sussing out. And sometimes rewards go to personalities, not performance, or they go to personalities and not effects. Anybody on my team listening to this know we have a teammate who is exceptionally effective, but it comes at a cost, and he's going to listen to this and he's going to laugh as everybody. But hey, he's rewarded all the time because I'm an effects-based dude, and I can deal with his idiosyncrasies all day long. And I've always embraced that, the kind of, not saying he's a weirdo, but I've always embraced weirdos and contrarians and people that deliver effects, because they not only deliver effects, they increase effects because they make us think differently and deeper and stuff. So that builds trust. I think the last thing too is, if we show up at work and assume people are out to get us, it's hard to have trust. If we show up to work and assume best intent, which I can do because I work with great people here, is I laugh all the time, because even when things go sideways, and doesn't happen very often, or I'm like, my eyebrow goes up like, what the hell? I don't look at it from a position that this teammate's trying to screw over my team, or this teammate's trying to, do something negative. I'm like, hey, why are you thinking that? 96% of the time, it's because they have very good intent and are trying to deliver better effects, trying to help my team. I'm just unaware of something, or I don't know, or I'm the guy behind, trying to snap link in and catch up. But it makes it a heck of a lot easier to be a good teammate if I trust my teammates. So again, long discussion about trust, but there's a few things there. So, and I think we can boil it down to, I could have just said, well, have a good attitude, right? It helps build trust.
Well,
Don't
A
be a
little
dick.
deeper than that.
well,
That's pretty good too, though.
it's definitely is definitely warranted. I mean, especially as just the nature of country change. Regardless of what it is, things change. We're dealing with a different generation that's coming into the workforce, a different generation joining the military, and to understand that trust. So as the audience hears that, they understand that trust is a pivotal cornerstone thing that not only have an organization, but you should have. Do you trust yourself? And how to build
That's good.
trust within yourself, and being, having the right thought process. Am I thinking the right things? And if I'm not, how do I start thinking the right things so I can make the right decisions? And do I analyze myself, not beat myself down, but then being able to having a conversation with, if I work for Bill, having a conversation with Bill, hey, where am I missing it? So that
Yeah.
I can build trust with you as a supervisor, so then I can grow and understand and expand. And if I'm, working alongside Gavin as a teammate, hey, where do you see me building trust with you within the team? Those things are extremely important. Um, the Before we shift to your transition out of uniform, and you've been weaving us in and out, but what was your really darkest time in the military that you were able to that took some time to come back from?
Yeah. Yeah, many people are familiar with this vignette. And I had some really hard days. The 9 November ambush, when Kyle White got his Medal of Honor, I will always say was my hardest day of my life, because I had a number of soldiers that I couldn't account for immediately, so was taking actions. But that was a very long night. But what many people are familiar with, and if you're not, I mean, you can find a lot on it about the Battle of Wanat. So, I mean, this isn't about me, but in 1990, as an infantryman, I was only 3-time BZ infantry person from my year group, and the Army was always exceptional to me. I got every assignment I wanted, first choice. And I took first choice assignments for the Army. What I mean is, like, when they were looking for people to go to Korea, I wanted to go to Korea in command, so I could come back to the Rangers as quick as I could. End up going to West Point instead. But the point is, I benefited from the Army system a lot, and I tried to give it 110%. In a 15-month tour, we were in 1,100 engagements with the enemy. We did 5,300 fire missions and 3,800 aerial deliveries. We were largely in combat every single day. There was a few days when we didn't have significant firefights out of 425. From my PDSS, with Chris Cavoli, very much respected his battalion, there were 2 bases that were air-centric: Bella, known as the ranch house, in Bella. Air-centric meaning we couldn't drive there. It was impossible to drive there. So we had to rely on helicopters in the mountains, in the weather, and my folks were isolated. I understood why those bases were put there by Chris, but I thought they'd outlived their usefulness. So during my pre-deployment site survey before I took over, I wanted to move those. And for a number of reasons, I wasn't given the resources or permission to do that, but that was a continuous talking point with me throughout my tour. These were both in the Wygall Valley. We got permission to collapse the ranch house, which was the deepest in the valley, and consolidate it at Bella. Days before being able to consolidate it, and 3 months after we were there, the ranch house was attacked, and I had 11 soldiers wounded. They ended up calling A-10 strike on inside the base to kill the insurgents that had breached the wire. Phillips earned a Distinguished Service Cross, Eric Phillips, and Matt Farrar, the platoon leader, earned a Silver Star in that battle in August of 2007. Leadership decisions said, well, now, we're out in this hinterland, but man, the enemy just kind of hit us hard. We can't move for at least another 6 weeks because as the United States of America, we don't have the power to control this information operations narrative. There's no way, which I think is frickin' bullshit. Yeah, we can, but we chose not to, so we kept people in harm's way for another 6 weeks because we were worried the Taliban would have a negative messaging campaign and we couldn't squish it. So we consolidated in Bella, and that's still way deep in this valley. And for 14 and a half months, I worked to move that base. And as we know, anybody that's fought in Afghanistan knows there is somewhat of a fighting season. And in the winter in the mountains with snow, the enemy are less mobile. So that's a great time to move. For us. So bottom line, we get that permission. We start moving Bella. The most dangerous portion of Bella was the movement on 9 July 2008. Our risk assessment said we'd likely lose a helicopter in that extraction, but we were able to extract from Bella and move to a base closer to my battalion headquarters that was not road centric. So we did that movement. We had all the assets in the world, 2 platoons of 155s, 2 120 mortars, 60 mortars, LRAS, which is a long range targeting system, tow vehicles, Mark 19s, 50 cals. We had a lot of resources, and they were much closer to a reaction force that was able to move by road. Everything was going good from the 9th to the 13th. A number of things happened throughout there, but on the 13th of July, a force of about 200 insurgents attacked this nascent base, killing 9 of my soldiers and wounding 27. And it was investigated as it should be. Ryan Pitts was put in for a Medal of Honor for that. 16 people in for Silver Stars. It was a big battle, reported internationally, and it was investigated thoroughly. Everybody interviewed 72 people, and all the wounded that were still alive gave statements, and it was determined it was a tactical victory at a very high cost. We redeploy, and then quickly I moved from the 173rd, or the battalion command, to be the deputy commander of the 75th Ranger Regiment, which also entails duty of being the counterterrorism task force commander in Afghanistan. As the, I'll say, CTTF, counterterrorism task force commander, I had SEAL Team 6 Squadron, Ranger Battalion, Delta Squadron, Task Force 160th, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and about 1,000 intel analysts from different agencies. And this is getting to the story with the hardest day, right? So 13 July, that was a pretty hard day, and worked through it. But a year later, I'm commanding the counterterrorism task force, and we're doing Operation Marauder Rapids under a phenomenal major, Johnny Chung. And ultimately, we kill 120 over about 72 hours. We do the largest airstrike in Afghanistan in years, kill 124 enemy, most by direct fire contact with a Ranger company and a Delta troop. And we lose Master Sergeant Stevenson in that fight from Delta. And then the phone rings. And I've been up about 72 hours now, and the phone rings, and it's General Mulholland, the USASOC commander, U.S. Army Special Operations Command commander, a man I respect immensely. And, he called, expected, hey, condolences on Master Sergeant Stevenson and congrats on Marauders Rapids. But he said, hey, Bill, there's a shitstorm brewing. And the father of one of the kids killed in, the lieutenant of the person killed in the lieutenant in charge of the Battle of Wanat, underneath the company commander that was there, his dad is demanding another investigation. And there's a reporter, Greg Jaffe, on Bagram Airfield by chance, and I'd like you to talk to him. And I'm like, sir, I'm commanding the National Mission Force. Been up 72 hours. I don't have time to talk to a reporter. He's like, no problem. Not an order, just an ask. I'm like, okay, thanks, sir. Hangs up. 5 minutes later, he calls back and he says, hey, Bill, the vice, who was General Corelli at that time, another man I respect immensely. He'd like you to talk to him. No pressure, no order. I'm like, sir, I've been in the Army a couple of days. I said, I get intent, right? I said, I'm good. I'll meet with him. So, 72 hours into my day, talked to Greg Jaffe for about 8 hours. And that started a year and a half of accusations about me and my company commander failing to plan, resource, and supervise these kids. Real international in effort to media effort, pundits, politicians, many ill-informed or misinformed, trying to make my paratroopers victims of the Taliban and victims of the chain of command. And I had to look inside and say, okay, so how do I deal with this? I'm still in command of this organization for another 2 months. They're not pulling me out. When I go back, I'm the DCO responsible for everybody back in the rear, training, evaluations, Ranger assessment selection program, acquisitions. I have pretty good duties. But I had to come to grips with this, and my deal was I was committed to delivering the truth to the grieving Gold Star families, because I thought this was a bullshit narrative that was going to hurt people. I was committed to protecting the ROC's reputation, which, the unit jumped the most jumps in World War II. It was called the ROC for jumping onto Corregidor and killing 10,000 Japanese with less than 2,000 people. We had a pretty good reputation in Vietnam, the only unit to jump in Vietnam, and then we've been doing good in the global war. I needed to clear the valorous company commander who had earned a Silver Star in the battle and preserve my family name was kind of the fourth thing to me. So a real politically driven CENTCOM investigation went forward, and a general I'll write about later, a Marine general, did just a shitty job, politically motivated, and we ultimately ended up getting letters of reprimand. I rebutted that, unbeknownst to the Army. I had kept nearly every document, everything from the ROC, because I planned on writing a book for my paratroopers. So every unclassed thing I had, and I was adamant about not overclassifying things. So I had much more than the Army ever expected me to. So normally a person rebuts with about a 3-page document, and I rebutted with about 900 pages. But to do that, I'd do my DCO duties, work from 18 to midnight or 02, go home, be back for PT at 6, and on a weekends it'd be from 1800 to 06. I'd go home and sleep for a few hours and come back and work with a great lawyer and told our unit story. Well, this is a long way of saying about a year later, the letter of reprimand was withdrawn based on all facts known. Okay, that was a step, and I thought I would then keep going on to brigade command in my career, but not so fast. Now we're going to do a promotion review board to see if you should really be an 06. And I'm finding this humorous because I was an 06 and I was commanding the National Mission Force. And I'm just, at this point, I'm just kind of laughing, right? And I'm not sarcastic, disrespectful, but I feel a little bit like Brer Rabbit, right? Is the Army's bureaucracy is trying to decide if I should be an 06, if I should ever command troops again, and I'm commanding the National Mission Force with, the elements all people wish that they could even meet one person from, and I'm in command of them, right? And having time of my life, and working with Rangers every day. So it keeps going. Well, get the promotion review board. Yep, you should still be promoted, and each one of these is an exhaustive compilation of answering questions. And then, so I think I'm good to go then. Not so fast. Now we have to do a command review board. And it's not like they just grab a few generals together and say it. They got to wait till a scheduled meeting of people senior to me meet. It's just, that might be 4 months later. So this process went on for over 18 months. So what's the long story on this? This unit today is known as most decorated unit in the global war. It's got 3 living Medal of Honor awardees, a Presidential Unit Citation, a Valorous Unit Award, and over 400 individual awards. The 3 Medal of Honors, the Presidential Unit Citation, and Valorous Unit Award, not one of those things were approved until I was cleared. Not one. And if there's anybody listening, anybody in the Army, in DOD, that thinks those Medal of Honors would have been approved if my unit would have been written down in history as being jacked up, they're lying to themselves. There's no way. The line between a DSC and a Medal of Honor is non-existent. Really is. A Medal of Honor is, in the regulation is the same as a DSC except more. What the fuck does that mean? And our unit, we are in the process. One other person that we had put in for a Medal of Honor, the only award I had downgraded, is being reconsidered now. So I'm hopeful a year from now we'll have 4 living Medal of Honor awardees from that tour, every single one deserved. There's a lot about resilience in there, and I tell a long diatribe, and some people might be in the bathroom right now or refilling their beer or whatever, rolling their eyes, I don't know. But there were GOs that were involved in that, some I worked for later, that stood on the sidelines during that and disappointed me. What really well-known names, and I'm not rebutting them. The Army stood on the sidelines and asked a Marine to investigate me because they weren't confident in their credibility. With every ounce of my soul, I had more faith and confidence in our institution, the United States Army, and in truth and facts, and in the righteousness of what we did in our preparation than about a dozen 4-star generals, then the Secretary of the Army, and well-known 4 stars. I mean, I can list them by name, and you'll all be like, "Oh shit," Yeah, and I'm not bad-mouthing them, but as 1, 2, 3, and 4 stars, they stood on the sidelines and let me fight the battle. My brigade commander said, "I've had a great career. I just want to retire. Thank you, boss, for having my back and doing nothing." For my company commander, I told him, "You continue playing Army, do Army, love Army. If I can't win this battle, you're not winning this battle. So you do you." And he's a great friend, and he's an 06 commander now, who I have the utmost respect for all the company commanders I had there. But he is doing America's business, and I think will continue to go on. But what's the resilience story? What happens when most, we'll say, Army people or government people get in trouble? Well, or have a bad turn. We see them on Fox News for 5 minutes lambasting the unit, lambasting the Army. The Army screwed me over. Early on, I said, okay, the Army's rewarded me at every single turn, and I'll be damned if the first time things don't go my way, I'm going to stand on a pedestal and badmouth the Army. I'll be damned if I'm going to badmouth the Army because leaders I respect are disappointing me. I don't know their whole circumstance. I know with 100% certainty, and I demonstrated, I would do something different, but I wasn't going to hate on them and hate the institution. This took a lot of resilience, and I'm not breaking my arm, patting myself on the back, but in 15 months, I'd went through a lot. I lost 26 people killed and 143 people wounded. I had to think about this. When Timothy got killed, that was a shock to our organization. And I had to talk to that unit and say, okay, we're going to celebrate Tim, and you know what you're doing tomorrow? You're going outside the fucking wire, and hopefully you're doing that for 15 months. Because if you're not, it's because you can't go outside the wire because you're hurt or dead. So that was my resilience speech to them. And you know what they did? They went out the wire every morning and every afternoon, 2 patrols a day for 425 days. And occasionally I was privileged to go with them, not nearly at their pace. But again, I talked about earlier, hey, we got to think through these bad days. I could never anticipate WANOT. I could never anticipate the Army, DOD, congressmen, well-known media people coming after me and my family and telling me I was 180 out from what I am. You failed to plan, resource, and supervise? Are you fucking kidding me? That's what I'm the master at planning, training, and resourcing and supervising, much more than anybody that accused me of such. But what am I going to do? Cry? Curl up in a ball? No one was coming to save me. No one was coming to save my company commander. No, you make choices based on what we talk about, based on your education, probably based on your foundation, your education, your training, your experience, threats, time available, and then you do the very best you can. And I have a letter from the Secretary of the Army saying you may be busted to 05, you may go to jail. Keep leading the task force, champ. I've got them. So I don't know. A whole lot of people would do things differently. I don't know. I just don't know. I know I've been privileged. One of those 4 stars who's very, very well placed in the Army asked me several times to talk to people of different ranks that were going through a hard and what I'd say unfair investigation, and I helped them, and it was awesome. Paying forward. Where can I help a great warrior who is not being supported, trained, trust, support, known? How can I help that? Well, go back to the questions. How do you want to be remembered? Me as a great teammate. What do you stand for? I stand for people. I even like my enemies. I don't like them. I respect them. I don't besmirch them, disparage them. I think there's all of them I fought were as committed as I was. They were pretty good at their jobs. But I stand for people. And, what's my framework? The Ranger Creed. And, Mac, you talk about, things, how do things apply to the civilian world? I mean, if you've lived the Ranger Creed for a day, it's very easy and you believe it. It's very easy to translate that document to the civilian world and just see what it means. And so I'll leave that kind of story.
That's good.
There about resilience is I'm not the master at resilience. I've demonstrated to myself and my teammates I'm resilient enough, but I got to work on it to sustain enough. It's not like seeded in. I think it can erode, it can evaporate, and I'll just leave it at that. I had some people shared some interesting quotes. People that are better at articulating greatness than me, but whether it's resilience or fitness or whatever, it's kind of like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it atrophies, or stagnation is regression. I like that when people talk about that, and some of these things. Bottom line, you got to work on it. You can't just. I don't think we get there and then it sustains itself. So
I think that's 100% perfect. I mean, because it shows that you went through a challenging time, definitely that kind of pressure, especially at the top of your career, starting from where you started from and then find yourself after doing your absolute best as a leader in one organization in the Rock, and then being promoted, and then in charge of the national mission force, and then being told like, hey, that kind of this storm is coming, and then for you to embrace for the storm, not complain through the storm, but prepare while you're going through the storm, and then to communicate and stand up for yourself, uh, to clear the name of those individuals, one who gave their life for their country, those who supported their comrades on the battlefield, and then those who wanted to continue their career past that point and not having some of the support that you would hope to have as you were going through that hard time, that you were able to sustain that. And I think that's a wonderful thing to really, for the audience to see that it, this stuff will come. Those difficult times will come. And if you continue to practice what you preach, and build in within yourself, and build those systems, when things, not everything's going to work out. Not everybody's going to, you're going to come out of it, because other people find themselves on the bad end of it, where
Mhm.
it doesn't work out well for them, even when they were right. But saying that, hey, I'm gonna stay true to myself. This is what I believe. This is what I stand for. This is my framework, like you said. And it's that resiliency, because you constantly build it in, and we can see that, and not just hear it, but we see it in the character that you've been able to sustain. One, you talked about, you built a team around you, not just with those who've been a part of in a civilian workforce, but people that are served in within uniform, that came along with you. Like most people, if you're a bad seed, people are like, hey man, I don't want to work with this guy outside in any kind of capacity at all. But I think it shows the type of character that you continue to instill uh, with who you are, and those around you.
Hey
You're
Mac,
trying.
one
Go
thing,
ahead.
if I
Sorry.
could too, is um, you know, I never saw, I serve proudly. I'd say I'm just a blue collar guy, right? And that's what I liked.
Yeah.
And I liked hanging out with whoas and kind of walking around and talking shit with young whoas. It's not even a job. It's just like, it's not even a hobby. It's a game, in the sense of you're
Yeah.
just having fun all the time. Um, but only there was a Vanity Fair article by Mark Bowden, the guy who did Black Hawk Down, and it was called The Three Battles of Wanat. And in one of the last paragraphs, and I never thought about being a general officer. Wasn't like what it wasn't my deal. I just thought about what I worked down and in, and to my detriment sometimes. I'm better at talking up and out because it protects the team better. But I was down and in and talking to peers, adjacent units. And he had a paragraph that said, any aspirations Bill Ostlund had of being a general officer are gone. And that was the first time I even like thought, well, I could have been, or should have I been. It wasn't on my radar scope, but it was really telling to me, because I was like, okay, I never had a thought. So any thought I ever had, I never had a thought, right? So, but it stuck with me, and I had a decision. And you think about it, we all make decisions to transition. So, I was in '06 with 20 years and 0 months in the Army. I was DA Frocked, promotable in DA Frocked, and was supposed to go into command at 22 years as an '06. All right, 20 years as an '06 in Hawaii. And that was pretty quick. Um, but I kept getting deferred, deferred, and deferred. Now, a lot of people I think would have fought until they got through the fights, retired as an '06. I made the decision to serve as an '06 for 10 years and 2 or 3 months, 3 months, I think. Um, and I knew I was a terminal colonel, and that's a powerful rank, right? But as a terminal colonel, I was a brigade commander. I was the XO to General or Admiral McCraven and General Votel, two of our best warriors on the planet. General Votel's CAG director, and then DMI 6. All jobs I wanted to do, and the Army knew hey, we're not grooming this guy to be a field marshal. It's not happening. We're just like letting him hang out with us and work 7 days a week and do that. But my point is again, it goes to resilience and service. Why do you serve? Why are you in the job? Is it to be, and I experienced the same thing, here in Google is, hey, the rules of the road changed and directors and senior directors, blah, blah, blah. And it can be frustrating, but you know what? I'm not going, and I shouldn't say this on here. Then they're not incentivized to keep me around, but I'm not going anywhere, right? I mean, I love the shit out of my boss, my teammates, the mission, hey, and last time I was promoted was in January of 2009. I'm a pretty good performer, and that's it. But you know what? Hey, I'm not serving to be like a field marshal. Sundar's not stepping down, letting Bill Ostlund come in to be the CEO of Alphabet. It just ain't happening. But I love being on his team, and working with the people, because I take enough time to set these things right here, these down for a little bit, and spend time with me and knowing me and what's important to me, and not what's important to everybody on every social media platform. Some of it's important to me, but not all of it. What's important to me, sometimes I like daily, got to sit down and just spend some introspection time. What makes me happy, what makes, fulfills me, what provides my purpose. Google doesn't provide my purpose. It's not their job, but I find purpose there. And for your transitioning folks, I mean, I talk to 3 transitioning folks a week, probably. They reach out on LinkedIn, and they can reach out to me on LinkedIn if they're remotely interested. It's not corporate America's job to tell a veteran that, oh, we're going to provide purpose for you. No, it's a transactional relationship. They're going to pay you for 40 hours a week, and you're going to deliver effects, and they're going to give you compensation for your effects and benefits, and then you can go find purpose outside of work. That purpose you didn't have time for when you were working 80 hours a week and pulling SDO and SDNCO and CQ, and the first sergeant screwed this up, so now you got to come in, and second lieutenant, he messes stuff up too, so now you got to come in, and no, find your purpose. You now live to work, or work to live. I mean, and you find purpose outside of work. Is it woodcraft? Is it hunting? Is it shooting? Is it coaching your kids' sports? Is it spend time with traveling with your wife? That's your job. That's your job. And too many veterans go through these programs that are like, oh yeah, somebody else is going to find your purpose. No, not the truth. You're going to find your purpose. And you start by putting these things down. Quit worrying about that. Don't watch Real Housewives of Nowhere, and all other crazy reality TV.
Farmer Wants a Wife.
Then, yeah, well, there you go. What's the one with a dude that has like 16 wives or something? Well, Sisterhood of Wives or something. But I'm like, God, one's too much. But anyway, shouldn't be saying that. But the point is there's a little element to taking responsibility for ourselves, and so I'll just pause there.
No,
I'm starting to pontificate too much.
no. I mean, that is one of the things is finding that purpose. Beyond the track, that is one of our biggest purposes. Forging leaders, disciplined, resilient, and trusting. We're really looking to shape not just individuals but organizations that have character and unwielding integrity, and that is part of our purpose, our give back as individuals, either coming out of uniform or out of uniform, as we give to civilian organizations, individuals, and back to the DoD organization, because that's where most of us grew up. I grew up as a young man like yourself in the military, and had a lifetime, and I enjoyed myself. But being able to find my purpose outside of uniform is extremely important, especially as you transition, and being able to tell people like, hey, you need to find your purpose, because maybe you You land at Google. Me, I'm in public education, and I will tell you that
Yeah.
it is that time that I spend with some of the young people that I can pour into them, because the pay isn't equal to what I give. But I'm not there for the pay, because if I was there for the pay, man, I ain't giving them nothing, because it's not there. But because there's a next generation that's coming up, and how, in that time that I have.
Well, if I can, thanks for that. One of my my second company commander when I was a lieutenant is a phenomenal man and teacher, and he posts routinely just the most tear-jerking, phenomenal things, because the same thing, he's basically committed to being a platoon leader for life, right? And every year he gets another 30-person element, and now he's in middle school, so he gets multiple platoons. Now I guess he's like a company commander, but the stories he posts of impact on these kids, and he posts some of their work, and some of the things that they say. I mean, that is transformational. I mean, that is an incredibly honorable purpose. And yeah, I can't say enough about people like yourself that choose to better other Americans. And so I'll pause.
Yeah, there's so one of our mentors and friends as well. I know JC Glick. He talks about this purpose as well, and he said, 'cause it's very hard to especially when you come from the military, that does become your purpose or your identity, and sometimes to a fault. And when that's taken away from you, it's like, what really is there? And it goes to, with suicide and mental health among veterans as well. But I mean, it's something he said is like, he finds purpose in like everything he does, like every little event or something he's doing the day. Hey, that's his purpose right now. Because when you attach yourself to just one thing, and that's, it's taken away from you, it's like, what's your rallying point? And it's kind of, I wanted to go back to what you talked about a little bit, one, thank you very much for sharing that, Bill. And, until somebody has been wearing your shoes, nobody can really talk about that, about what you went through. I mean, the feeling of betrayal that you must have felt too, I can't even imagine that. But, you explained a situation where your back was against the wall. And the people that you thought, hey, this rank will have my back or something, and that was, it proved to not be there at that time. And you talked about the Ranger Creed as well, and I know that I've hearing you in school talk about that, about it being your rallying point. When you were going through all this and you're still performing at an extremely high level while you're undergoing investigation and all these different things that have possibly life-altering consequences on you, what was your rallying point? What did you fall back to in those moments? And you did talk about it a little bit, but just if you could expand on it a bit.
Yeah, I wish I had a pithy answer. It was my faith or this, but I do really think it goes back to those questions, right? That I knew the answers to, and that's why I say the answers to those questions steeled my soul. They steeled my soul, and I knew the answers on 9 November during Kyle White's ambush. I knew them on 5 June when Timothy Viamoto was killed. I knew them on the Battle of Wanat. I knew them when it seemed like the world was coming against me and my family, right? And that is, again, people, I had an obligation to protect my company commander and my unit's reputation. Again, the Ranger Creed, every single thing in there, energetically, will I meet the enemies of my country? Well, I'll meet the enemies of my fucking unit, my people too. I mean, and here in Google, meet the enemies that try to, cause us grief. And then again, how do, at the end of the day, if I am busted to 05 and I go to Leavenworth, or, I guess probably be busted to something else, but go to jail, at the end of the day, I want people to be telling my sons that, hey, we really respected your pops. Your pops was a really good teammate and looked out for us and did everything. And there's not a single person in the task force, in any of my commands, that will ever credibly tell you two things. Number one, I worked for Ostlund and I never got the opportunity to go to Ranger School. It's a frickin' lie. There's no such thing, okay, ever in my career, ever, from team leader through. And I got crazy people. The Army's not letting in logisticians. Oh, we figured it out, and they went. So that, and Ostlund denied fires to me. No, no.
You knew him.
I
You knew
think
the exact number.
Yeah, well, the facts are, because I went through a lot of investigations about that, and I don't take it lightly, but I knew the ROE because the ROE was how I protected my soldiers. And I think when we put America's sons and daughters in harm's way, we owe them the weight of the United States of America, bar none. No caveats, no nothing, period. And some trauma I have is I found this thing, Mark 777. It's triethyl aluminum, it's napalm. It's Army's new version. Frickin' Air Force has bunkers full of this stuff. It would have been transformational in Kunar. And I would have used it in accordance with the ROE. And I told all senior leaders, everybody that came by, I'd get, oh, you're using more fire, 75% of the fires in all of Afghanistan. Well, thank you for that stat. Great. So what? Air Force generals would call it, GBU 38s cost $38,000, this and that. I don't care. I'm not paying for them. I'd say, and I'd always say, every time people called me and challenged me on fires, I'm like, Kunar is like the fourth smallest province in Afghanistan, but surprisingly, there's room for one more person. So why don't you come out here and walk around with one of my squads or my platoon, and then we'll talk about restricting fires after you do that for a week. Oh, no, I'm just saying, and then on using, in Vietnam, they had the term shake and bake, HE, and white phosphorus. Well, there's a purpose for using that. It's not a cute little term, but when white phosphorus splashes into the mountains and go under rock crevices, people that are under the rock crevices shooting guns at you, stop shooting guns at you. And they either die in that hole from painful burns, or they leave that area, generally leave their gun because they know we can see them if they're running with their gun, and that doesn't work out too well for them. So we'd use that extensively, but it's using, all tools. Remember what I said? If you can have education, training, resources, well, we're responsible as leaders to know the capabilities of those resources and maximize those. So, when I didn't have predators flying over top of me all the time, our ISR was eyeball, bino, raids camera, clue, sight, ITAS, tow sight. We started, we shot 106 tows during that tour. And everybody knows the tow's been going away for 20 years, right? Raytheon loved me. They came out, gave us the first ITAS FTLs, far target locators. So when we'd put the sights on, we'd get a 10-digit grid. Guess what young Huas figure out with that? Oh, wow, I can call a polar mission like a mother with a 10-digit grid, right? So I can glass, and I can get 10-digit grids, and I got 2 platoons of 155, and they know how to figure out how to make those rounds land at the same time in, different locations, because artillery guys are smart. And then I can shoot the biggest threat with a tow and have the whole world blow up around that biggest threat with 2 platoons of 155. I mean, it's how do we use the tools that we have? How do we empower young Huas, 19-year-old on an ITAS site, ITAS FTL, to just, hey, figure it out, dude. Figure out how to get effects. And when you do, I'm going to reward you for that. And that spurs additional innovation. And I know, as I'm habitually doing, I'm wandering all over the place, but it's another long answer to a short question.
It's all right. So you transitioned from the military to civilian leadership. The structure that you experienced from the military, that discipline, and I know it is a definite shift. Some of it, not all of it, because you're still in senior leadership, especially in an organization like Google. What is the hardest part? What has been the hardest part of your transition?
Um, I get asked this question a lot, and I kind of flip this around a little bit with you gentlemen on here, with most in the audience, or many in the audience. We've spent our whole adult life immersing and re-immersing in new cultures. And people not familiar with the Army are like, oh, you went in the Army for 36 years, and they have this, like that's one culture. But you men can respect that's scores, if not hundreds of cultures, right? Hey, it was a culture when I was enlisted Ranger. It was a culture when I was a specialist and a Jumpmaster. It was a culture, working with much older men and having to make my own bones. It was a culture when I was welcomed into the NCO ranks. I leave to that support brigade. That was a new culture. I go to college in a National Guard LURS unit. Totally new culture. People can say, oh, well, it's all Army. It's Army ROTC and it's Army National Guard. Believe me, totally different cultures, right? I come to 101st, a huge division, kind of my first conventional assignment. That's a culture, right? And then, then I get immersed in Saudi Arabian, culture, working with multinational people, really closely over time. That's a culture. We go into Iraq, we got POWs working with those people. They're not bad people. I mean, they're doing their thing. I mean, one of the guys that I'll never forget was a wounded Republican Guard armor commander. He was a captain, right? I was a lieutenant, laying on a stretcher. He's fearful in his eyes. Really good looking guy, black jacket and big mustache. And never forget him. I had nothing but empathy and respect for him. I'm like, that dude was just doing what his country, asked him to do. He's scared to death. I'm going to do something to him. I'll die protecting that dude laying on a stretcher. But that was a new culture and an experience. And we just go through our whole career, staff jobs, command, new units in Italy, out of Italy, going to different countries. We spend our whole adult life immersing in new cultures. If you're a lifelong learner, your emotional and social IQ in the military grows exponentially faster than anybody in the civilian world. We lived DEIB long before it was even mentioned, and it's come and gone out of the corporate world, and we've been living it since, at least in the Army, since 1950s when we first integrated. We integrated before the country, and I'm very proud of that. So my point is, as our peers transition, just look at it like going to a new unit. What did you do to be successful in a new unit? Well, you probably did a little research, so you know the organization. Try to know some of the personalities. Hell, you can find out stuff about everybody on the net. Use that for good. Be quiet and listen. Go in and listen. Use your emotional and social IQs. The skill sets that you learned in the military. Go in with a positive attitude. Don't be a victim. And that was something I was going to say earlier is, with your organization, I think is wonderful. I think some organizations try to make out every veteran like a victim. Very, very, something like 99.86% of the people I know are better humans for their service, whether that was 2 years or it was 32 years. They're just a better product. They're a better human. So how do you convey that in a positive sense? How are you positive and value added? Military people are grossly more experienced than their civilian counterparts, in my mind. When I interviewed with the late Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, I had some cool thing on my resume, like I was the CEO of a 4,000 person organization. That was my brigade, right, in the task force. Her question to me is, Bill, if you were the CEO of a 4,000 person company, why do you want to be my security director for a 3,200 person company? It's a good question, right? Don't be grossly overqualified. If they're asking for 6 years of experience, don't give them 36, give them 8, give them your last 8. You know, if they're asking you to run a team of 10, don't tell them you ran a team of 4,000. Look at your directs, you know. And I ran, you know, my primary staff or this 10 people. They all had master's degrees, you know, and they had, you know, all this experience, and our retention was phenomenal. You know, they're all career guys, right? It's honest. They're, you know, I built great teams. But so I don't find transitioning hard to work. The hard part is getting the opportunity to be interviewed. And I think collectively we're terrible at resumes. Very, very few resumes. And I proudly work with hiring our heroes here. So, you know, probably 200 people over the last 5 years that I've seen their resumes and interviewed them. Absolutely terrible. They're all like regurgitations of ERBs or ORBs. Army told me I was an assistant S3, so I'm not going to call myself a program manager. I'm going to call myself a program manager / assistant S3, or I'm going to call myself an assistant S3, and hope Bill Ostlund's reading this because he'll translate that for me. So I could talk, and I do. I talk to transitioning folks all the time. It's attitude. How do you translate your experience? When you mix military language and civilian language, that's just like writing your resume in English and Spanish. And it doesn't make sense. Even it doesn't make sense to the Spanish speaker or the English speaker. It doesn't make sense to Bill Ostlund, the military guy. It doesn't make sense to the civilian person. So, you know, it's important to tailor your resume. Boilerplate resumes in a corporate world, they might work at, you know, somebody that wants, your skill set, whether that's being a contractor overseas or Raytheon, they'll translate it for you. And some of these high turnover jobs, they're just looking for bodies. They'll translate it for you. You know, Google hires like 0.02% of people that apply, probably less than that now. Okay. Delta Force hires a hell of a lot more applicants than that. Okay, and how hard do people work to get selected into Delta? For a year, road marching, PT, shooting, studying. How hard do some people study to get into Google? None. They send a boilerplate resume and then they're like, wow, I was fully qualified for that job and they didn't pick me. Nope. The algorithm didn't pick you. Didn't even see you. So I just think civilian organizations, big companies. The other thing I'd say about big companies like this, and again, I studied a lot before I was interviewed. Felt confident, but I've learned exponentially more, and I continue to learn here. Our senior VP said, "Hey, Bill, I know you're kind of used to coming into organizations and learning them in a few weeks and having an impact." He said it's going to take you a year. And arrogantly, I was thinking, "Come on, boss, a year? I'll have this shit figured out in a couple months." Man, I'm 6 years in. I don't have this figured out. Like every day, I'm scrambling, imposter syndrome, trying to figure it out. But it's a fun. It's fun, right? Again, and we'll get to this, but I'm not people's resume writer. I can give people 3 bullets and tell you, no, this isn't even close. But there's people that can help with that. In a company like Google, people have to realize, and this is all the major corporations, look at Google like DoD. Google's got every staff function. It's got HR, it's got Intel. Intel might be Intel, or Intel might be marketing Intel. All of them have operations, and you figure our product areas like cloud, maps, Gmail, search, YouTube, and so we've got a plethora of others that I won't name, but all of those are like the services. They all have their HR, their Intel, their ops, their logistics, their finance, their communications people. So a lot of people look at a company like Google and say, hey, Bill Ostlund works in GSRS, that's Global Security and Resilience Service. I got all this skill set. That's 500 people out of 186,000. That's like targeting 1 battalion in the Marine Corps, saying, "Hey, my entry in is with Bill." No, it probably ain't. It's probably as a program manager in cloud because they're making billions of dollars a quarter, and they need a lot of people, and they're making money, so they have headcount. It's kind of understanding the organization to help set yourself up for success. And I think that would be true with Nabisco or any company, major company in America. So.
That's really good advice because, all of us, Gavin's at that position. I was at that position. You're kind of going back, rewriting your resume, going through resume writing class, being able to translate, having writing skills, being able to write effectively for that transition, which is, I think, is a really good advice for those who are transitioning out of uniform. So do not discount what Bill just said, because if you don't, you're going to put yourself at a deficit, and ensure that you reach out to individuals like Bill on LinkedIn who is willing to give you some of those insights. And there's a lot of veterans that are out there on LinkedIn is willing to help and have a virtual coffee to give you some direction, and don't be discouraged. Continue to move forward, and hope. That I wanted to put that out there because I know some people listening and be like, "Oh man, it's easy for you to say."
Yeah. No,
So.
well, and to your point too is, and I beat resumes, to death, but every single word you read the job description, that is the questions and the answers to the test. And then every single word on your answer sheet, your resume, needs to be directly applicable to the questions. It's not what's important to your last commander. It's not what's important to you or to your mom or your wife. It's what's important to that hiring manager. And I tell people, I'm pretty good at writing job postings, and we have a template and stuff, but I'll say to get it from Bill Ostlund opening it up, tweaking it, getting it out to HR, who does their magic to get it approved and posted, probably a 4-hour journey. I'd expect somebody applying to my job to spend a couple hours tailoring their resume to make it tell me that you are not only fully qualified, not only the most qualified, but the only qualified person for that job that Bill Ostlund wants to reach out and pull you through the screen when I see that resume. If you can get me that excited, you're probably going to get an interview. If you want me to caveat all your nonsense and stuff that's important to you, again, this isn't about me. I got an MSM when I was an E5. I got an MSM when I was a second lieutenant. I thought I was pretty cool. You know what Google cares about an MSM? Zero. They don't care. Now they might care if I make some sort of comment about that I have a history of being number one of X, rated number one, recognized, whatever. If I can somehow articulate that might be interesting to a particular job. That I have a history of making, a track record of developing teams that provide outsized effects or something. But they don't have the knowledge to translate that getting an MSM as an E5 means you were either a best ranger or some freaking division commander loved you like a son, right? That's what it means in at least in the old Army. But it doesn't matter to them. It's noise. It's distracting. It's probably disqualifying to have stuff that's important to you on a resume vice what's important to the hiring manager, the recruiter, the algorithm. And when I talk about the algorithm, that's a process. Our recruiters will upload my job description and push a button, and some magic happens somewhere, and he or she gets a bunch of resumes. And then they do the best they can based on the conversation I had to say, oh, I know what Bill's looking for. And then they'll sort those 20 down to 10, and they'll send them to me, and I'll sort 10 down to 4 that I'm going to interview. So when people are like, dang, I had an 06 tell me I put in 865 resumes, I only got 2 offers. He's a good friend of mine. I'm like, dude, how at 20 you didn't stop and reassess, that this is a you problem. This isn't a hiring manager. Somebody goes to the work of putting a job description out there, looking at filling it. But that's a comment that stuck in my head, and I was like, 865 boilerplate resumes, shotgun blasting across the world, 2 offers.
I mean, after this, I mean, I'm just gonna, send my OERs to Google and see what happens. I mean,
Yeah, there you go. That's all you need to do. Just send them and have it like a sticky on them.
Yep.
Scan them with a sticky on them.
There we go. That's all you need.
So, got a few more questions, Bill, because we honor your time and we don't want to take up the rest of your Friday. So, real quick, talking about discipline in security and risk management and decision making. What's the difference between rigid discipline and adaptive discipline in leadership? That's one question. The second question: when is it important to be flexible rather than follow a strict structure?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I immediately think of, rigid discipline. It flashes my mind back to 175 in the 80s, right? But, rigid discipline, I think we would all agree that it's really required in a number of circumstances. Some people say when there's, imminent danger and little time. So we just need obedience. But, maybe it's with a less trained and less experienced organization or with group of teammates or with an individual. So if you have less training, less experience, you're perhaps time constrained and the threat level's high, there's some dangerous something in the environment, that probably requires or leads to more strict obedience or rigid discipline. And that's probably in an effort to save injury, death, or significant damage to property. We're like, that's a distant third for me, right? I'm worried about protecting, Googlers from harm, injury, slip, trip, and fall, or a distant third is protecting our property. So, but rigid discipline with my corporate teammates would may be required, and I could be, or one of my close peers could be very directive in that. And you know what? People will react. They do. They do very, very well because they understand the urgency. But, conversely, with adaptive discipline, I think it's preferred all the time if the conditions are right. But again, it goes back to what we were talking about. What's your foundation, education, training, experience that you have? Hopefully those things have built up over time. Then you have a little bit of time so you can pivot in there and address whatever threat or issue you're dealing with. I don't think, I can mentally go through the different tech companies I go work with, and I know the personality. Amazon's a very structured company that likes military people because they show up to work even during the holidays, during the highest season, and they're disciplined and they work, and Amazon rewards them for that. I know Apple's more disciplined than some. Facebook in the middle, we might be on another end. Not critiquing. I'm not comparing. I'm just saying. How discipline works into cultures is important, though, because some military people are not happy in adaptive discipline or an unregimented organization. Some will thrive in Apple or in Amazon. And these are just people I have friends and acquaintances in some of these organizations, and when we talk over Coors Light or Voodoo Rangers, like big wide eye emoji, right? Like, what? But and that makes it easier for the security people if it's a more regimented or rigid. But anyways, that's my take. That's my take on those things.
Second to last, or sort of like that. building the next generation of disciplined leaders in today's world. And I think you talked about this because you talked, like putting the phones down. In today's world, distractions are everywhere. How can individuals develop a strong discipline in an age of constant stimulation? And you are working at like one of those organizations that says, no hate, we all use Google. How do you even get the Googlers to stop Googling?
Yeah. Well, I don't want anybody to stop Googling. I want you all to get on. I want you to click. Yeah. I want you to click Google, Gemini, YouTube. YouTube's the second largest search engine in the world. Did you know that? That's pretty cool. Huh? And the largest in some countries. And I try to use that like 8 times a day, but that helps pay the bills. So I just want your whole audience to, if you enjoyed this podcast, please click on Google like 75 times and YouTube 75, help pay the bills. But no, I like this company. It's pretty awesome. So what are some of the things? I think you got to know thyself, right? And that goes back to putting your phones down and just like get to know yourself, be responsible for yourself. Don't be a victim. It goes back to life's not fair, neither is death. And when we're talking about, self-discipline, be comfortable with yourself and not have to have that external stimulation, like a hit of caffeine or something. Establish process and good habits. Be disciplined. So I held this up, this high adversity resilience training. If you look at my calendar today, it says heart, do it from 1 to 2. Like go make sure I'm doing it, and get my certification done. You know what I'm getting when I get my certification? A little certificate to me, and it's going to make me feel good. My boss doesn't care about it. It's optional. Nobody in the world cares about it, but I care about it, so I have it on my calendar. I use the phrase when I'm talking to people, when we're talking about habits and being better and being disciplined, is I think we got to practice discipline. And I always use this term on like Wednesday at 10 o'clock when it's sunny and 70, right? No threat, nothing. Because what do we do when we're like sitting here coming up with a workout plan when you're all rested, you got your coffee, 10 o'clock, you like write down all sorts of stuff that, if you were tired and exhausted and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, you probably wouldn't be so aggressive on writing this stuff down. But you write it when the conditions are right, you develop your habits, and then you think through them and then think through, well, can I do this at 2 o'clock on Saturday morning? And am I going to be disciplined when it's 34 degrees and, sleeting out? But if you write it in good conditions and think about it in bad, then execute it in good and execute them in bad, I think we can develop that discipline that carries into an awful lot of things.
Made me feel horrible for the last week I've been sick. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Remember, false motivation is better than none.
Yeah, a lot of people in the Fayetteville, Pinehurst area are probably asking themselves that right now. It's like, oh, it's 18 degrees outside right now, and it's almost March here. What's going on?
Yeah. But just think about that. What a great opportunity for that HUA company commander that just had it on his calendar to go to the field this week. Just the resilience and the teamwork and the stuff. The HUAs are coming out of the field this afternoon going, man, that sucked. That was the coldest shit I ever experienced. But that's going to bond that team, and certainly, the commanders and leaders had to be cognizant and don't get people hurt and, no frostbite, nothing like that. But those kids coming in, road marching in from the field, 2 hours ago, cleaning Mr. Gunn in the weapons shed, going out tonight, they're going to have a great time telling those stories. Those teams are going to be better than the ones that sat in and did online training or something because it was safe and it was warm. It's just, I'm just excited. I would have liked to be
shared hardship.
I mean,
shared
hardship, right?
We're retired now, so we're like, you know what? I'll go out running. Oh, this is for you.
Yeah, well, hey, a couple of things along that line, and again, digression's good, right? So the National Guard, it was Nebraska Long Range Surveillance. It's all part of like 35th Infantry Division, and you know, people can go, oh wow, yeah, oh wow, they're all prior service guys, most of them, you know, Ranger qualified Jumpmasters, and we could be hard mon frappies for like 24, 36 hours at a time, right? We come out of class on Friday afternoon, we're out doing sustained airborne training, we jump into Husker DZ. Clue, if you haven't been to Nebraska, the whole state, like a million square miles, is a DZ, but we had a thing called Husker DZ. Jump in real hard, like good training movements, you know, for like 24 hours, show back up at the LZ or the drop zone Sunday morning, helicopters landing. We're going to do a couple of, you know, helicopter blasts, go clean Mr. Gun, leaving at 5 in the afternoon, back in class on Monday. I mean, that's pretty good training. I mean, you know, it was a lot of fun. So, folks, if you're missing the fun travel and adventure, your National Guard recruiter is just down the road. 1-800 Army Guard. I bet somebody will answer.
my neighbor actually across the street, he just moved to Texas, and he's never been in the military, so he was all stressed out. Well, a couple of months beforehand, it was cold and it was raining. And he had called me. We were supposed to run because we had one of the monthly challenges, and we were going to run in the morning and do a workout. And he was like, "You're running in the morning, and it's supposed to be like raining and it's cold." I said, "Hey, brother, this is what it is." So he was like, "Rain check," and then he texted me later on. He was like, "Okay, I'm gonna stop bitching, and I'm gonna meet you in the morning." And this didn't never been in the military. He's gonna meet you in the morning, but he wrestled. He wrestled in high school,
That's all you
he
need.
had the mentality. And he got up in the morning with me, and we ran like 8 miles in the morning. And then, but he moved to Texas. I said, now you're PCSing with your family and leaving me.
Yeah.
I'm about to find some other civilian guy to come work out with me, because I moved 2 hours north of Fort Bragg. Bless Fort Bragg, but I wanted to be away from the uniform. And so now I got to find some other guy to work it out with. So my last 2 questions, talking about legacy and what's next. And so as you look back and now you look forward, what do you continue to challenge yourself and stay disciplined in the next phase of your life and career?
Yeah, I think at this point in my life, you know, discipline isn't really a decision. It's foundational. It's part of me. And I think it needs to be 24/7. I mean, I don't really know or associate with people that, I don't know, aren't like just inherently kind of have discipline practices. I don't think it works if it's electively employed. And, you know, just as a funny story, so a guy I've been in combat with like 6 times, and I have our desks next to each other in this mosh pit. And he's a former SF guy, about a year older than me, super fit. And we always joke, because I got a big sweet tooth, right? So we're going down, and whenever he's with me, and he's usually in the office at least 3 days a week, is like I got to steer clear of that dessert bar, right? But sweet tooth calls occasionally, and I got good habits. But so we had to agree to disagree that raisin oatmeal cookies are really Cliff Bars that are round. It's a healthy thing. It's not of like a dessert, right? It's not like, but I still get the stink eye because he's so disciplined. So he'll eat like a blackberry or something. You know, that's not very exciting. I mean, I like them too, but that's not like a raisin oatmeal cookie. But you know, it's fun. I'm around. My point is, I'm around people that have disciplined habits. If I was around people that just, you know, executed the 7 deadly sins as a matter of habit, it would be harder to stay on course. So surround yourself with like-minded, disciplined people. And I think it takes discipline and honesty to really assess and continuously reassess yourself and your teammates and your teams and the environment to identify personal and collective strengths and weaknesses in order to amplify the strengths and, I don't know what we'd say, mitigate the weaknesses, if you will. And at the end of the day, and this is what I like about your organization too, is I think you inherently acknowledge this, is, life's not about perfection, but it's really about perseverance, right? And some people can drive themselves crazy into self-harm by aspiring to be perfect, but maybe there's some reward in perseverance. Mac, you just talked about a cold, wet, rainy run. You persevered through that, and you probably felt good about it, and you and that teammate are going to talk about that story probably for the rest of your life. When he calls 6 months from now from Texas, that'll come up. So perseverance is important, and I think it's easier to persevere if you're holistically fit and improving daily, which takes discipline, right? So, and these things aren't hard. People get out of the military and try not to be judgmental, but I am. If you spent your whole career as an active infantryman that could get woke up on an alert at 2 o'clock on a Thursday night and road march 25 miles, how can you leave the service and lose all that discipline and let your health go, mental, physical, spiritual health go? And what is that saying about your respect for yourself and your respect for friends and family? And I think when people do that, there's something there on the mental, emotional, spiritual side that's affecting the physical. But, I'm just a little tough love, just calling that out. I have a story about that, but I just throw that out into the ether sphere.
Bill, like some of your comments have gone down in my mature age. You find out things you read, you need to, capitalize on it. I heard someone use this: silence is the true language of God. All else is poor translation, Rumi. So you've gone in the book. The one is the answers to my 3 questions still my soul. What do I stand for? What is my framework? And how do I want to be remembered? Life is not fair, neither is death. And this is like gold, because a couple of days ago, oatmeal raisin cookies are Cliff Bars round. That's called the book.
It's all in perspective.
I'm sticking with that. Hey, 3 hours in, if people can take away a oatmeal raisin cookie with no guilt, bless you.
Because I was like Wegman cookies, man. They had these chocolate chip cookies, but I was like, how about if I just use just not chocolate chip? What if I do raisin cookies?
Yeah,
because it's oatmeal.
Cliff Bar.
It's a Cliff Bar round. It's like pan chocolate disc cookie. Like pan chocolate disc. It's like a chocolate chip cookie. Nope. Oatmeal raisin cookie is a Cliff Bar round. And, of course, life is not about a perfection, is about perseverance. So you've gone in the book. And so our last question, and I know if Gavin has anything to follow up with this last one, is really, how can our audience connect with you, be it, to learn about your leadership, discipline, your resilience from your experiences, and any closing thoughts that you have, Bill?
Yeah, well, first, again, I'll go back to my first comment, and that is, I more than I can express, more than I have the capability to articulate, I appreciate what you two and Chad are doing with Beyond the Trek. I think it's important. My themes and messages for transitioning veterans is kind of own yourself, and own your journey. And I'm a tough love sort of guy, but I am very, very empathetic to people. But as I deal with people, just like I did in the Army, and I'm not saying, and I know I'm far from perfect at this, but it was tough love because I want to inspire people to aspire to be the best version of themselves. I can't make people happy. I can't make them successful. but I can, kind of train, trust, support them in their journey, and those are kind of some of the comments or closing comments for me. I'm very cognizant that I have this script run in my head all the time that we all have an hourglass, and we only get to see the bottom of the hourglass. We don't know how much sand is in that top portion. Might be 3 more minutes, 3 days, 3 years, 30 years. But there's a finite, somebody knows. Somebody knows how much sand is in there. Something knows, some entity knows. And if we're always waiting for somebody else to do something for us, or if we're feeling like a victim and waiting for what's deserved to be ours, that sand's still flowing through. Or do you just run wide open, enjoy people, enjoy your teammates, enjoy your lot in life, enjoy your time off, find ways to mitigate your negative thoughts and amplify your positive thoughts, surround yourself with good people, like-minded people, avoid the negative Nellies that always have something to cry and bitch about. I think collectively as a veteran community, we can do better for our folks. And I know some of our teammates, they're in a bad spot. They're in their want out right now, and it might be 18 months long. Collectively, we can help them. But I'll also tell our teammates that nobody's authorized to stay in the pity pot for fucking ever just because we're not ready, man or woman. We're not ready to own our journey. Before we got on, we talked about a 100-mile walk that I'm going to do, and I'm inspired by some very, very important people to me to do this. It's called the Cowboy 100, and I want Chad to get Gavin and Mac required to do this. They said they wanted you to make them do this, but it's really the Cowboy 200. I'm just doing a 100-mile walk just to shed pain and feel what Mac was talking about, that cold, icy run, and just feel some pain, earn it. And I think whatever your version of earning it is should be exercised occasionally. If you want to get in touch with me, again, I have no head count. I'm not a recruiter. I'm a veteran advocate, and want to help people on their journey, because I feel a little guilty at how easy my transition was. And you can see my name on here. You can find me as William Perrins Bill Ostlund on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good about responding back and checking people out. Eventually, someday, with a little help from others, I'm going to have Trilux effects-based operations up and running, just to make it easier to connect and share some stuff. But Trilux is 3 lights. Like I have my 3 questions and I have my 3 sons. What are your 3 things in life, your 3 lights that are making you more effective? So effect-based outcomes, right? What are your 3 lights that are making you more effective? And maybe you turn that on your head too. What are the 3, black holes that are making you less effective? Is it alcohol? Is it social media? Pornography? Is it health? Is it really? I don't know. What are your 3 dark spots? Load shed those, grab onto those 3 lights, and be better tomorrow than you are today. And I think we as a veteran community can help each other out. So that would kind of be my closing comments. Mac?
You got anything, brother?
No, I don't. I just, again, like I stated earlier, Bill, we can't thank you enough. I know that personally I'm going to be digesting this, for days and weeks after. And, it's a lot. You put a lot of great material out here, and I know it's going to touch, not only us, but all of our listeners and everywhere that it goes. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Seriously, it's more therapeutic to me probably than any any value I can give a listener. But again, thanks for laughing and chatting. Again, I'm here with two veterans. One I've got a lot of history, or not a lot, but shared history with, and it's just special to me. It's a special way to spend a Friday. So thank you guys for the opportunity.
Bill, thank you. It's an absolute honor, to meet you. For definitely one reason. The reason I chose 173rd is because of the legacy you guys did in Afghanistan in 2007. So when I went through to become a cadet at Campbell University, and when I became the number one cadet in the state of North Carolina, they're like, "What do you want?" I said 173rd, and
Awesome.
it was because of what you did with Iraq. And I just appreciate your time that you spent with us today to have a conversation, to give our audience value added. And I think a lot of people are going to take some things from here to apply to their life. I definitely will. You are down and etched in my book and of stone. And I think, definitely that number one quote for me today. So I'm going to go give you oatmeal cookie, because it is a Cliff Bar round. But thank you, audience. Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, and share this. Visit LinkedIn, reach out to Bill. Those veterans are out there that need some direction and guidance, so you can get some purpose, get some direction for yourself, get some help for yourself if you need help. I think one of the last three things that Bill talked about, those three lights. Find out what your three lights are, like he talked about, and then find out those three black holes, and reach out to us as well. And we're willing to listen to you, because we have all been there in that pit, and we found our way out of it. We love you guys. Thank you.